Good afternoon. Good afternoon, my friends. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, August 16th of 2024. We're going back to Vegas. We're going back to Vegas, babies. We're going back to Vegas. Oh, something just happened on the Law and Crime feed. That's weird. It's like those colored bars. Remember this from like back in the day when there were only like 5 TV channels and at night they would go off duty and you would see this on the screen. Oh, too late. They fixed it. But yeah, I'm really dating myself now, huh? They're not ready for us. They were told not to come back, I think, until 12:30 anyway, and it is currently 12:25. So we're gonna have a couple of minutes. How's everyone doing? How is everyone doing? This is turning out to be a pretty fun trial, isn't it? Maybe it'll catch on. I think a lot of people are watching the other trial out of Florida with the neighbor who shot her neighbor through the door. It's another stand your ground case out of Florida. I just could not do that again. Couldn't do it. So I picked up this one instead. And so far, we're having a great time. That witness yesterday was phenomenal. The guy who was talking, who was giving Telly's boss baby shade on his cheap sneakers from Ross or Marshalls. That guy was awesome. What was his name? Zachary, hashtag gatekeeper, GAIT. He's the one who picked out the way he walked, and he picked out those cheesy Nike imitation plastic sneakers, and he knew when he saw that on TV, he knew it was Boss Baby's sneakers. And also because of the way he walked. It's not starting early today. Hi, Cheryl. It is starting at 9:30 Pacific, which is 12:30 Eastern. And we're here for it. Yeah, I'm glad I'm covering this one too, Miss Kitty. This is fun. This is really fun. So we have a couple of minutes. And before we get to the coverage, we got to talk about this major hack. We got to talk about this major hack. There's a bunch of hackers or a hacking firm or some hacking company that has stolen the social security number of every American. Look at this. Social security numbers of almost every American, billions of them. Billions of them. And it's insane. And we talk about data breaches all the time. We've talked about them with regard to AT&T, had a bunch of data breaches recently. And luckily, the sponsor of my channel, who's also the sponsor of today's show, can help protect you. And I highly recommend that you do this. You can sign up for a free 2-week trial, and 2 weeks is enough for Aura to find out if your information is on the dark web. And I use it, and I thank God that I do, because every day we're reporting on new data breaches. So let's give our sponsor, Aura, a listen for a few minutes while we're waiting for court to start. Did you know that the odds of falling victim to online crime are 1 in 4? Online crime is soaring. It's time to get smart about online safety. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura provides everything you need to protect your privacy, identity, finances, and your family in one easy-to-use app. Do you even realize how much of your personal information is already out there, being sold by data brokers to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you? Well, if you Google yourself, you may find something like this. And it may shock you to know that your full name, home address, email address, health records, and even relatives, it's all out there. That's one of the reasons you need Aura. Aura shows you which data brokers are selling your information and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Not only does cleaning up this information reduce the amount of spam that you get, but it will protect you from hackers who could use the information to help them access your social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also helps protect me and my family from online threats by providing antivirus and malware protection, a secure VPN with military-grade encryption, credit monitoring, spam call protection, parental controls, password management, identity theft insurance, and more. without having to download several different apps. It's really easy to set up. And best of all, I get everything at one affordable price. With the family plan, Aura will help you protect your kids by blocking harmful content, managing how much time they can spend online, and providing you with peace of mind while they game with cyberbullying and online predator threat alerts. I value my privacy and my online safety, and I value yours too. So go to aura.com/Melanie Little to start your 2-week free trial, because you can't put a price on peace of mind. I've also put the link in the video description below. You can thank me later. Do it. You'll thank me later. If you've ever had to deal with having your identity stolen, it is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And Aura actually has people to deal with that for you. So I wouldn't promote it if I didn't believe in it. And it's really important, especially nowadays, because people like our parents' age can get their homes stolen, like their deeds are all of a sudden like in someone else's name. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. So can't be too careful nowadays. It's less than a Netflix subscription. That's my pitch. And I wouldn't pitch it to you if I didn't believe in it. So Sarah Boone. Yeah. So when is that trial scheduled to start? Because that definitely is going to be a good one. I mean, how is she not guilty? I mean, can anybody tell me how she's not guilty? She put her boyfriend in a suitcase. He died. And then she was taunting him. And there's video of her taunting him. Seems like a slam dunk to me. I don't know. She's going to be representing herself. That's wackadoo. That is what I call a whack job right there. When is it supposed to start? We need to find out. I was also watching this morning. Oh, Maureen Francis, thank you so much for the early Cash App. You are always so sweet and kind and generous to this channel. Watching a hearing this morning on Shanna Gardner. Do you guys remember Shanna Gardner? She's the Stampin' Up heiress from Utah who allegedly hired somebody to take the life of her husband, Jared Bridegan. And he was shot on a street when he got out of the car to move like a spare tire that was put in the road in order to stop him. And it was tragic. He was shot dead with his little 2-year-old daughter in the backseat of the car. Horrible. October 17th for the Boone trial? That's too far away. It's too far away. We need something closer than that. It was not on purpose that she put him in the suitcase. Look, if the dude got in the suitcase by himself, that's, I don't know. Drugs are bad. You guys do not do drugs. Drugs are bad. Drugs are bad. Right. Oh, do you think he got in there on his own? I don't even know. I haven't I'm not like up on it enough, but I was watching a hearing on Shanna Gardner this morning. I think she's been extradited to Florida. So now it's in Florida. She had fled to Washington State, and that is where her children are with her parents. And they were talking at the hearing this morning about doing the depositions of the children. So I was kind of in the middle of that. And then I just sort of got sidetracked. I forgot what time it was. And I was like, oops, I'm late. But here I am. And we're back. This is only day 3 of the Robert Telly's Boss Baby trial. And we've already heard from 15 prosecution witnesses. They only have 20. So I wonder if they're going to wrap today. Yeah, they were playing hide and seek. Anthony's afraid of suitcases now. Anthony, just listen. If your girl wants to play hide and seek, just be like, no, I'm not getting in a trunk. I'm not getting in a trunk of a car. I'm not getting in a suitcase. There's nothing good that can come of that. Yes, Jennifer, it is Stampin' Up founder's daughter. Shanna Gardner. And she was in court this morning for this hearing with, his name is Mario Fernandez, who was her husband after Jared. And her name is escaping me right now. Jared's wife, Kristen. Her children with Jared had a really great relationship with the children of Shanna and Jared, and they've been taken away. Haven't been able to maintain the relationship with their step siblings, and it's very, very sad. Oh, Scott, the Albert's bulkhead doors was going to play in a suitcase, but Someone from up north scared me. I don't know. Thank you, Patriotic. I'm glad you're here too with your whole entire family. Hope the fam is watching today. Donna Adelson is coming up in, is it really soon? Is it September? I mean, look, we're already halfway through August. I don't know where this month went. I don't know where this year went. I really don't know what's happened since 2020. Like, it has just gone so fast and it's so crazy. Ernie was like, I think it was Queen Olive, but I could be mistaken, who said, I hope she does a demonstrative of herself trying to get out of the suitcase to prove it was an accident. Interesting. Oh, Jen, is that Casey Anthony's attorney? Jose Baez. Yeah, she had like, I was watching the hearing for a bit. She had like 4 attorneys in court. Her family is very wealthy. Her mom started this Stampin' Up company. Is it like a scrapbooking company or something, you guys? And I did some pre-trial on this a long time ago when she first was arrested. And like the grandmother was like posting stuff on her website and blogs, and like how after Jared's murder, they were going on vacations. Like, it was crazy. Oh, they're back. They're back. Well, the sound is up anyway. I don't know what that means. I wonder if they're going to treat us to a nice split screen today. Because that was pretty nice yesterday that we got a split screen. Good audio. That Bad Neighbor trial was just making me mad. It was just making me mad. Like, really? You shot your gun through the door at your neighbor because you were yelling at her kids because they were playing outside? I don't know. The little I know about that case just made me think that Susan Lawrence was like the nosiest neighbor, mean to everyone. And really, she felt the need to shoot a mother of I don't know how many through her door, and she's going to claim stand your ground. I don't know. I'm not buying it, but I haven't been watching the trial. So you tell me if you've been watching that trial. Susan Lawrence, what do you think?
Michelle Leavitt presiding.
Okay, go on.
Order to be seated, please.
Does the state stipulate to the presence of the panel?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Hamner had to step out, but with your permission, I can just start. If that's
Sure.
okay.
Go ahead and call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Anastasia Barton.
Anastasia. Love that name. Isn't that the name of Sleeping Beauty? Wasn't her name Anastasia? It was definitely a Disney character. Her neighbors have been harassing her for a long time. Susan was in fear, in your opinion, not guilty. Rasha's mom, thank you. I always appreciate your opinion. And to be honest, I haven't been watching the trial. So that was just my gut from watching some of the pretrial stuff. I watched her interrogation.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Anastasia Barton, ANASTASIA BARTON.
How are you employed?
I am a forensic scientist trainee at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Forensic Laboratory in the biology and DNA detail.
And how long have you worked there?
I have worked for Metro for approximately 8 years. I've held various positions during that time frame. I started as a forensic laboratory assistant, and then I promoted to forensic lab aide in October of 2016 until I promoted to forensic laboratory technologist in the biology and DNA detail in July of 2018. And I held that position for approximately 4.5 years until I promoted to forensic scientist training. And that is my current title. I've had that title for approximately 2 years.
Okay, so it sounds like in 2022, you were a forensic technologist for the DNA lab
Yes, that is correct.
for Metro.
Yes.
What does that person do, a forensic technologist?
A forensic laboratory technologist is the person who will receive items of evidence, examine them for the possible presence of bodily fluids or DNA, test those items for DNA and put them through a lab processing. And once a DNA profile is generated, that is when a forensic scientist comes in to interpret the data that came from the samples that I have lab processed.
So you're coming in contact as a forensic technologist with the actual evidence, like swabs or actual physical pieces of evidence?
Yes, that's correct.
And you receive that evidence in sealed evidence bags?
Yes, that's correct.
Is part of your responsibilities checking to make sure that the bag is properly sealed and no one has tampered with it before you open it and start dealing with the evidence?
Yes, that's correct.
When you are dealing with the evidence, are you wearing like regular clothes or do you wear some sort of protective clothing in order to avoid contamination?
I wear personal protective equipment, and that is my lab coat, my face mask, as well as my gloves. We also use sterile procedures in the form of cleaning our bench space and laying down sterile filter paper and always working evidence before known samples.
And when you say
Just a quick break to say bonsoir, Wilma. Bonsoir. Love France. I'd love to be in France right now.
always working evidence before known samples, can you explain for the members of the jury what that means and why that's important?
Yes, evidence samples are evidence that are items of evidence that are collected from a crime scene. They are also known as question samples sometimes, and that is because we don't know the source of whose DNA could possibly be on them. They are from a crime scene. Whereas a reference standard or a known, or usually it's called a buccal swab, those are known samples because we know where they came from. If a buccal swab is submitted, that is a standard. It is coming from inside the person's cheek. So they take a cotton tip swab and they'll swab the inside of that person's mouth. And it is considered a known standard, a reference standard, because I know whose cheek it was collected from.
And so obviously it's important to keep reference samples separate and apart from questioned evidence to avoid any possibility of contamination.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, when you get an item of evidence that say is like a swab or a cutting or something like that, what does it look like when you're doing your work or you were doing your work as a forensic technologist?
The item of evidence, it really depends on what it is. First, there are different packages that an item may be placed and contained inside. Bigger items might be in a cardboard box or a paper bag. Smaller items could be in manila envelopes. So you start by examining the outside of the package first and documenting the seals and the integrity of the package to make sure it's intact. And then, depending on what the item is, when you open the package, you will verify that whatever is listed on the outside of the package, there will be like an inventory of the items that is inside that package. You will verify that anything that is in that package is correct with what you were expecting and what was requested for analysis. So usually like swabs, smaller items, there will be smaller envelopes inside of a larger outside envelope.
Okay. And then do you do something with the items of evidence, like put them in a test tube, or how do you extract the potential DNA source?
Yes, any sample that I take, depending on if it's a cutting I have taken or I've consumed an entire swab for my testing that has been submitted, they will all go into a test tube, and there will be a reagent blank that is controlling for that sample, for that extraction set, and those will all be in tubes from that point. So the item of evidence is separate from the extraction.
Okay. And
Laura, that's interesting. I did not know that. Laura says that the 4 women that reported Rob Telley's that we talked about the other day, who filed the civil rights lawsuit against him in the county, are in court every day in honor of Jeff Gehrman. I did not see them in court. I'm going to look for them now in the gallery, and I wonder if they're going to testify. I thought they were going to testify, but if they are going to testify, then they shouldn't be sitting in the courtroom. So I wonder if their testimony was excluded. That's really interesting. Thanks, Laura J.
And there's sort of a control within that to make sure that the testing went through correctly and that there wasn't any kind of variability in the testing.
That's correct. I believe I mentioned reagent blank
Yeah.
when I mentioned extraction. Those are samples that have absolutely no DNA in them. They are just part of the sample set. So I'll have maybe 10 samples that I'm working. There are 10, swabs, for example, that I've cut. So there's 10, and then there's 2 reagent blanks that are initiated. So all of the reagents, all the chemicals that I am adding for that extraction process will be added to all of them. So that ensures that the chemicals that we are introducing into all of the samples, we have control for them. We know that there's not expected to be DNA present in those because it's just regular blank tube with those chemicals.
Okay, and so you can tell if everything's functioning properly, because if your reagent blank showed the presence of DNA, you would know like something went wrong in the testing process.
That is correct. The reagent blanks are
Okay, here's a shot of the gallery. What I definitely do not see is Rob Telly's wife anywhere behind him, because she would be sitting on this side of the courtroom behind him. I don't think that's her in the back row. I can't believe how many empty seats there are.
a method to check our quality control to make sure that a blank is blank, that there is no DNA detected in that sample. We also have negative and positive controls later on in the process to ensure, again, that the chemicals that we're using, that they're working properly, and as well as our instruments are working properly.
Okay, so I want to talk about this case now. What items of evidence did you work on or conduct, I guess, the forensic testing process on in terms of this case?
For this case, I was requested to examine fingernail clippings from the right hand and the left hand of the decedent, as well as a swab from the right hand and the left hand, a swab from a left ankle and a left foot. And there was also a reference standard, that is that known sample that was submitted, and that was from the decedent Jeffrey Gehrman.
Okay, so all of your samples were fingernail clippings, hand swabs, a swab from the left ankle, and a buccal swab from Mr. Gehrman himself.
There was also a left foot.
Left foot,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you. All of those, fair to say, were collected at the autopsy of Mr. Gehrman?
Yes.
Okay. And all of those items, I assume, are separated by location, like the left fingernail clippings aren't thrown in with the right fingernail clippings, that sort of thing?
Correct. Everything that is impounded is expected to be in its own separate package. And if I were to notice some kind of discrepancy, it would have been documented. A CSA or a detective would have been notified. But in this case, the items that were listed on the outer package matched the description of the envelopes that I received, and everything was packaged separately. So the right fingernails were in a separate envelope from the left hand fingernails, from the right hand, from the left hand. And then there was a separate package that had the left foot swab and the left ankle swab, and the swab from the decedent Jeffrey Gehrman was also in a separate package.
Okay, and you keep all of those samples from the various locations separate when you're doing testing as well?
Yes, that is correct. We and I only examine one item of evidence at a time, and that is to ensure that we're keeping the integrity of our work process. So once I am starting and finishing up an item of evidence, I will change my gloves. I will clean that bench space. I will lay down a new filter paper. And I do this every single time for every single case.
Okay. So when you
Procedure.
are working with an item
Protocol.
of evidence, and in this case, the items that you just listed, do you do any kind of preliminary test for the presumption of blood?
Yes.
And can you explain to the members of the jury what that is?
When there is a stain that is indicative that the stain could possibly be blood, usually there'll be a stain on an item that would have a reddish brown color to it. I will perform what is known as a PT test. It is a chemical test for blood, and what that is a color test. So I will test a small portion of a stain, if there's a stain present, and if the color changes pink, then it is positive and is a presumptive test. So it was positive for the presumptive blood test. And if there's no color change, then it is just negative. It's a negative presumptive blood test.
So I want to leave aside the reference sample, the buccal swab of Mr. Gehrman, but in terms of the swabs of the hands, the fingernails, and the left ankle and left foot, what were the what did that presumptive test reveal about those items of evidence in terms of whether they were presumptive for blood?
All those tests turned pink, so there was indication that it's positive. So it was documented to be positive presumptive blood test for all those samples.
Okay. And you said that you also had the buccal swab of Mr. Garriman. I assume that wasn't positive for blood, that came from his mouth?
That was not tested for blood. That would not provide any contextual information if the decedent was bleeding or not. And that was just cut and processed into the extraction process.
Okay. And you, at the time you were doing your testing, did you have a reference sample from someone identified as Robert Tellis?
I did not.
Okay, so you only had the samples collected from autopsy?
I also received, there were handbags that were packaged, but those were not requested for analysis. So they were documented as being in the package and received but not examined. And I also received a package that had shoes, but they were not requested for analysis.
Okay. After you, I assume you did testing on all those items for DNA, the presence of DNA.
Yes, all the items that were requested.
All the items that were requested, which included the swabs of the hands, the fingernails, and the left ankle and left foot?
Yes.
Okay. After you complete your testing, there's data generated on each of those items. Is that fair?
That is fair to say. We do have several steps throughout the lab processing. The first step can be the screening process. The second would be extraction, where we apply chemicals and heat in order to break those cells open. And then there's a quantitation step to determine the amount of DNA that may be present in those samples. And that gives us an indication of the quality of the sample, whether or not there's inhibition present or degradation present. There's different values that can be interpreted. And then there are additional steps like amplification, where we make many copies of that sample in order to have enough DNA to produce a profile. And lastly, we put it on an instrument to generate a DNA profile. So in this case, I sampled the items, I extracted them, I put them on the instrument for quantitation, but I did not interpret the data or continue the lab processing portion going forward. Another person in the lab, a forensic scientist, stepped in and continued that process.
Okay, yeah, you got my next question. So that very last step of the interpretation, that was done by a different individual at the Metro Lab?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Could I just have the court's indulgence for 1 second?
Court's indulgence. We love how they're so kind to each other here. The lawyers are kind to each other. They're nice to the judge. They're nice to the witnesses. It's a whole new world. I love this witness. First of all, girls in STEM. I love that. Second of all, she's so young. She's so knowledgeable. She loves her job, right? It's what we try and teach our kids. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. That's what they say. She loves her job. She's a great witness. She's looking at the jury and she's making stuff that could otherwise be very dry, very boring testimony a little bit more interesting. That's what I think. What do you think?
I think that is it. Thank you. I will pass the witness.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Barton, at the time that you performed these tests, you were acting as a forensic laboratory technologist trainee, correct?
No, that is not correct. I was a forensic laboratory technologist. My current position is forensic scientist trainee.
Okay, so you're currently then a forensic trainee as we speak.
Yes, I am finishing up the 2-year process, at which point I will promote to forensic scientist 1.
You had testified that presumptive blood tests were performed upon the samples provided to you.
Yes, I did.
Those were of the hands of the decedent?
Those were on all of the evidence samples that I have tested, the fingernail clippings and all of the swabs from the hands, the left and the right, the left ankle and the left foot. Those were all tested for the possible presence of blood.
Now, as to the test, the presumptive blood tests on the hands, were they from both the left and right hands, or were there separate presumptive tests as to each hand?
Each hand. They were individually packaged. So one was worked separately from the other. So when I take my bench paper and I open my envelope and I describe what it looks like and I document the staining present. At that point, I will make certain determinations for if there's staining present. Do I want to test this for the possible presence of blood? Yes, I do. It's characteristic of possibly containing blood, and I will test that sample. I will cut it and put it in the tube, at which point everything goes away. The envelope, the swab, envelope that contained that swab will go into that package. I will bleach down my area. I will lay down a new filter paper. Then that next sample comes out once that area has been cleaned and a bench paper has been applied. Then I will start the process over again, documenting what that staining is, what that swab looks like, or fingernail clippings, whatever was submitted. I start over kind of fresh. So those were tested for the possible presence of blood separately.
As to the hands, was there a
She's
presumptive
my hero.
positive for
She's
both?
my hero. And the reason why is because she did not look at the defense attorney Draskovich once during that narrative answer. She was looking at the jury the whole time, like she was teaching a class, and gave this long narrative answer. And I think he thought that he was going to trip her up somehow. She's just going about her explanation as if, she's just trying to help him, the defense attorney. It's great. If you weren't watching that, go back and watch it later.
The left hand and the right hand.
Yes, that is correct.
As far as the fingernails, was there a presumptive test done on each fingernail? Were the fingernails grouped together?
The fingernails from each hand were grouped together. So there were fingernails from the right hand and the left hand. So each individual fingernail was not collected separately. It was collected by hand. But the left and the right were in separate envelopes. Yes.
Same question concerning the left ankle. Presumptive positive, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But not
Anton, we've decided that this defense lawyer reminds us of the actor Eric Roberts, brother of Julia Roberts, and you can't unhear it once you think of it.
the right ankle, or that was not submitted to you for presumptive testing.
That's correct. I didn't receive a request for analysis for a right ankle.
Same question concerning the left foot, presumptive positive
Yes,
for blood.
yes, that's correct.
Nothing was submitted to you for the right foot.
That's correct. It was not requested for analysis.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Just one question. Ms. Barton, you said you're a trainee for Forensic Scientist 1.
I'm a forensic scientist trainee. It is the entry-level position of that classification. Forensic laboratory technologist has different job duties and responsibilities, as I've described, receiving the evidence and doing the lab processing. When you become a forensic scientist, you're then trained on analyzing data and statistics, calculations, and report writing. So I kind of
Report writing.
shift gears a little bit. However, I can perform the entire process all the way through. I am fully trained.
Okay, and the person who, in this case, who ended up analyzing the data that you got from these items of evidence, that's sort of the job that you're going to have next, right? The
Yes.
interpretation.
Yes, that's correct. It's the job I currently do. I do
Correct.
perform interpretation. However, my classification is trainee. I have finished the training program. I am
Okay,
signed
that's
off
enough.
for independent casework. I have taken qualifying exams.
Let's
and
call the
proficiency tests
person who
even in order
interpreted
to
the data.
test my competency in that skill set that I have
Anastasia.
developed since promoting.
Anastasia,
Thank you. No other questions?
we believe in you. We believe in your qualifications.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you
here
so much.
today. You may step down and are excused from your subpoena.
Who's
Thank you very
Mark
much for
Singer?
being here.
Thank you.
And the state may call our next witness.
The next witness, Your Honor, is Melanie Clovenhead.
There's a Melanie. We have a Melanie. Who's Mark Singer? Someone enlighten me. We're just going to fast forward a little bit.
The whole truth and nothing but the and spell your first and last name for the record.
Melanie Kolenovic, MELAnieKolJENOVIC.
May I proceed? How are you employed?
I'm a forensic laboratory forensic scientist employed with the biology DNA detail at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
How long have you worked in the DNA lab?
I've been full-time since January of 2020.
Okay, you were working in the lab then in 2022?
Yes.
Okay, and your position, what does that mean you did day to day?
When I started in 2020, I was a forensic laboratory technologist, which consisted of receiving items of evidence, screening or examining them, and then performing lab processing on them. Currently, I'm a forensic laboratory scientist trainee, which consists of the same thing, except I'm also in training to be a forensic scientist.
And the last part of the training would be the person who analyzes the data?
That's correct.
When you were a technologist, you were handling items of evidence and doing extractions and that sort of thing on it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. We just heard from your colleague describe that process, so I'm probably not going to repeat that with you. In 2022, though, you were the technologist, so you were dealing with items of evidence?
Yes.
Okay. And just so we're clear, when you were dealing with items of evidence, did you wear any kind of protective clothing in order to avoid contamination or that sort of thing?
Yes, I wear a lab coat. My hair is kept up in a bun away from my shoulders and my face. I also wear a mask and I wear gloves, which I change regularly throughout the examination and lab processing process.
Okay. Now, in this case, you were dealing with several items of evidence. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give us I don't know if you have it memorized or with counsel's permission, if she could refer to a report. Can you kind of list out the items of evidence that you dealt with in this particular case?
I did perform 2 examinations of different unit records. Would you like both of them or just one at a time?
One at a time, I think.
Okay. May I refer to my report? Thank you. So for the first one, I received in one package a swab from the interior side of the left gray shoe, a swab from the bottom of a left gray shoe, swab from the interior side partial right gray shoe, swab from a piece of black, white, and gray rubber, swab from a handle of scissors, which was referred to as AB5, swab from handle of scissors, which was referred to as AB6. Another package contained a swab from an interior blade of a Husky folding knife. And then in another package was 5 tan straw hat pieces.
Okay, so let's
Ooh.
start with the shoes. I'm going to put on the overhead what's been admitted as states 263 and then states 272. Do those items look familiar to you?
They do not, because when I say a swab from, that actually means I just received like a cotton swab from the actual item. I did not receive the item or actually look at the item or determine where to swab. The swabs were given to me by the person who analyzed the shoe and swabbed that.
So we have testimony from a crime scene analyst who worked in the field. So sometimes they would swab a piece of evidence and then you just see the Q-tip or the swab that's been impounded.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's labeled for you so you know what the swab relates to. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So with regard to what was labeled to you as a left gray shoe, interior side, and then the bottom of the left gray shoe, did you do any presumptive tests for blood on what was identified to you as left gray shoe swabs?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
May I please refer to my, thank you. So for the, the interior left side,
The interior side of the, left gray shoe.
and that's lab item 13.
That is lab item 13.
That was negative presumptive blood.
Okay. And what about from the bottom of that left gray shoe?
That was also negative presumptive for blood.
Okay. You also received a swab from the interior side of a partial right gray shoe?
Yes.
And also pieces, I'm going to put on the overhead now, states 274. What was identified to you as pieces of black, white, and gray rubber?
Yes.
AKA pieces from cheap sneakers, Nike imitations from Ross or Marshalls. A Pink Swan gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much. And to those of you who have randomly been gifted this morning, welcome. I think you're going to like it here.
With regard to, let's go back to the partial right gray shoe. What was that in terms of whether it was presumptive for blood or not?
The swab from the partial right shoe was the positive presumptive for blood.
And then putting again states 274, with regard to the pieces of black, white, and gray rubber, what was the presumptive, what did the presumptive test tell you?
Positive presumptive for blood.
We have blood on the shoe.
In addition, you swabbed some scissors, is that, or you received swabs from scissors?
I received swabs from
Yes.
scissors.
I got to get that straight. How were the scissors described to you, or well, they were identified, I guess, the swabs as AB5 and AB6, is that
Yes.
fair?
Yes, specifically from the handle of the scissors.
Okay, I'm gonna put on the overhead what's been admitted as states 259. And I think we can see there's a evidence marker there that says AB5. And then this is states 261,
Oh.
which also has a marker of AB6. With regard to those two swabs that you received, can you tell me whether or not they were positive, presumptive for blood?
Both swabs for AB5 and AB6 were positive presumptive for blood.
Remember how his finger was all cut up and bloody when they took pictures of him, even like 5 days later? These must be the scissors that he used to cut up the sneaker and the hat. What do you want to make a bet? And we got blood on both. In case you're keeping score, blood on the sneakers and blood on the scissors. And didn't the defense say in opening that there was no blood on the sneakers? Because now I'm confused. I'm going to have to go back and watch that again when, I have time. But maybe you guys remember.
And then you were asked to do a presumptive test on an interior blade of a Husky folding knife. I'm putting on the overhead states 256. What was your finding whether or not the knife was positive?
The knife was negative presumptive, or the knife swab that I received was negative presumptive for blood.
Okay. And so the scissors were positive, but just to be clear, the knife itself was negative.
The swab I received, yes, was negative.
Okay. You also received items or from a hat. This is states 285.
Those I did physically receive. So I physically received the hat pieces.
Okay, so you would have done the swabbing on those?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and I assume, well, actually I should ask you, how do you do the swabbing on that type of item?
So this item was impounded differently than how this photo shows. So the items that I received all of them in a large box where each individual hat piece, as you see on the screen, was in its own individual brown paper bag. Per our policy, we do not have lab items opened at the same time. So with the approval from DNA management, because we didn't know where the interior lining of the hat would be, I had approval to swab the lining of each piece with one swab. So
Okay. In case you're new here, you're coming over from, Karen Reed trial. Don't be confused because the Sprouts bag is not in the picture because it was used to collect the evidence, because they actually use proper evidence collection containers in Nevada. This is Las Vegas, babies. The Sprouts bag is where the cut up pieces of the hat were found in Boss Baby Rob Tellis's, the defendant's garage, hidden behind some other items. And the garage was a Michigas. It was the stuff everywhere. It was like an episode of Hoarders. So the Sprouts bag was not used to collect the evidence. That is what the evidence was hidden in. Thank you, Sharon Corner, for your $10 super chat. You are so kind and generous. I appreciate you.
So the way that looked to keep with our procedures of not having multiple items opened at once was I had clean butcher paper down. I was in my PPE, and I would open up one item. I would examine it to determine if there's any possible staining or to see if it had that interior lining that we were looking for. And then I would swab that with a clean swab, and that would go into a clean label tube. That hat piece would then be put away, the area would be cleaned, and another hat piece would be opened up to determine if there was a lining there. There was only 2 hat pieces that had lining, so the only 2 of them were swabbed with the same swab, and that went into one tube.
Okay, and with regard to the hat, did you do?
What? Hottie, first super chat ever. Thank you, Hottie, for your first super chat ever. I feel so blessed and humbled. Thank you. Love my channel, humor and commentary. Thank you. Love that you chose me for your first super chat. Congratulations. Welcome to the circus.
That presumptive test for blood?
On certain stains that I noted, but not on the swab itself.
Okay, and with the stains that you did do, what were the findings?
Those stains were negative presumptive for blood.
Okay, now you did additional work on other items of evidence, is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay, and many of those items, or several of them, were swabs taken from a vehicle?
That's correct.
Okay, and so that's the same thing where obviously you don't have the car in front of you. You got swabs or like Q-tips of what was done by a crime scene analyst?
That's correct.
Q-tips.
Okay, and did you also get or examine clothing that was collected?
Yes.
And I'm going to put on the overhead states 166.
Max is like Casper Scissorhands.
And did that clothing include Sperry shoes, like a right shoe and a left shoe?
Yes.
And did it also include a shirt and shorts?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also received swabs taken from the crime scene or identified to you as taken from a crime scene?
That's correct. Yes.
I'm putting on the overhead states 149. Now the swabs that you worked samples on with regard to those items, were they labeled to you as AB3, AB4, and AB5?
Yes, they were.
Okay, and they were identified as being taken from AB3 as a bush, AB4 is a bush, and AB5 is a butterfly?
I mean, I just almost can't, even with these diagrams, with the diagram of exactly where the body was, and RIP Jeff Gehrman, 100%, there's nothing funny about this at all. And from what I have read about Jeff Gehrman, he was an amazing man, an amazing investigative reporter, and tragically was stabbed to death by somebody who may or may not be sitting in the defense chair, named Robert Tellis. But look at the diagramming, look at the measuring, look at the outline of the body and measurements and diagrams of exactly where the swabs were taken from. It's a beautiful work of art. We're not used to this. We're being spoiled.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to kind of go back on these a little bit. The swabs that were all taken from the car, were any of those presumptive for blood?
They were all negative presumptive for blood.
Okay. Now, with regard to the Sperry shoes, what were the findings with regard to whether they were positive or negative for blood?
I identified several stains on the shoes, and of the stains I tested, they were positive presumptive for blood.
Okay.
So that's
What about
Gehrman's shoes.
The T-shirt?
The T-shirt also of the stains that I identified were positive presumptive for blood.
And what about the shorts?
As well as the shorts, the stains that I identified were positive presumptive for blood.
Okay. I want to go back to states 149. These swabs that were taken from AB 3, 4, and 5, which are the bush, and the butterfly.
Mhm.
What were your findings with regard to whether they were positive, presumptive for blood?
The two swabs from the bush, AB3 and AB4, were positive presumptive for blood. And the swab from the butterfly, AB5, was negative
A
presumptive
butterfly,
for
like a
blood.
real butterfly?
And so on that one item, AB5, that, to be clear, that butterfly, which is like a lawn decoration,
Oh.
that one is negative, but the ones from the
Okay, it's a lawn decoration. I thought it was a real butterfly. Okay.
bushes were positive?
That's correct.
Okay. So after you completed that presumptive testing, I assume not obviously all at the same time, but all of the items that we've been discussing, you put in test tubes and went through the normal DNA processing.
That's correct.
And then once that processing was done, does another analyst from Metro look at the data in the job that you're currently a trainee for, and does that person analyze the data?
Yes, she does.
Was there any discrepancy or anything unusual in the testing process that occurred when you were analyzing these items?
No, not to my knowledge.
If anything, if you were to see something happen with like a reagent or something like that, does Metro policy and probably lab policy require you to take note of it?
Yes, and depending on it, we will also document it. And if anything is not caught, it will also be in our review documents. That's available in the case file.
Okay, thank you very much.
A case file? Welcome letters
Yes, thank you.
to?
And we'll start with the end of your testimony, work towards the beginning. In reference to the items of clothing recovered from Mr. Gehrman, you had testified that the shoes were tested, presumptive test for blood, and both shoes, the topsiders were both positive for blood.
Yes. Do you mean, sorry, Mr. Gehrman's shoes?
Yes,
The ones I
Mr. Gehrman's
physically,
shoes.
yes,
Yes. The shirt that was worn by Mr. Gehrman,
Mhm.
presumptive test, blood.
Yes.
Same thing with the shorts, presumptive blood test, positive for blood.
Yes.
In reference to the bushes, it was specifically AB4, AB3, again, presumptive positive blood.
Yes.
And that would have been the area based upon the diagram surrounding Mr. Gehrman's body.
To my knowledge, yes.
Let's turn your attention now to the vehicle. You were called upon to conduct presumptive tests for blood.
Yes.
It was a subject vehicle. Do you know the type, the make, or just that it was from a vehicle?
It usually just says V1 or vehicle 1 when describing the vehicle.
And just so we're clear, the swabs that you received and tested presumptively for blood were negative.
That's correct, yes.
The straw hat, the multiple pieces, you tested presumptively negative for blood.
The stains that I located were presumptive negative for blood, yes.
Were those swabs also taken in order to test later for DNA?
No, for the sampling process, due to only looking for possible trace DNA, the staining was just in case if I saw anything, and due to them being negative presumptive, I did not take them forward. However, the stains are still available if you would like them to be tested.
So just so we're clear, then the hat was not tested for DNA.
I want the hat to be tested for DNA because I want to know if his head was in that hat. And she's like, we still have it if you'd like to sample it. Like, I want to go there right now and sample it to see if Boss Baby's head DNA is in that hat. Don't you? I mean, I need to know if he was wearing it. This is crazy.
The hat lining was tested, but it was not tested for, well, it was tested. The stains that I noted were tested for possible blood.
Okay, but nothing more.
Besides the possible trace DNA, nothing more.
Okay. And again, we're talking about the lining versus the exterior. The lining was obviously tested for DNA.
Yes, the exterior was not.
Okay. Was it, and nothing was found as far as DNA concerning the interior, the band of the hat, or there was, but it was very weak?
The findings of the DNA would be better explained by the forensic scientist who interpreted the results.
And I'm sure it's a she,
Fair
and I'm
enough.
sure she will be up next.
As to the knife, presumptive negative, correct?
That's correct.
Now, the scissors handle was presumptive positive.
Yes, for both of the swabs.
But as far as the blades, the cutting part,
I did not receive the cutting part of the scissors, so I am unable to say.
Randy says, at the end of yesterday's stream, when I went to mention you on something, I noticed a user that was very interesting, attorney Adam Lally. Yeah, I think that's somebody. A lot of people changed their names to match the trials that we're covering, so pretty sure that's not Adam Lally. But I do have a good laugh every time he comes in.
in reference to the shoes, the left gray shoe, presumptive negative,
You mean the shoe pieces?
the shoe pieces.
I'm sorry, can you please say which lab item it is?
Yes. In order for just
She's a
easy to work,
scientist.
you tested two shoes, correct? The gray
Yes.
shoes.
Yes.
One shoe was whole, the other was cut.
Well, they were kind of like both gray. Like there was two gray sneakers, one was cut up, and then also the Sperry topsiders that were Gehrman's shoes. I think those were also gray too. So she's right. Let's talk about the item number because she's a scientist and you have to be specific.
To pieces.
Yes, one pair of shoes I physically received, the other pair of shoes or shoe pieces I only received swabs from.
Okay. If you could narrow down your testimony concerning the shoe pieces,
Okay, yes.
presumptive positive?
Some were not. So 2 of the pieces of the shoe were negative presumptive for blood, and 2 of the pieces of the shoe were positive presumptive for blood.
Can you
Whose
tell
blood?
the court what other substances other than blood may create or cause a presumptive positive?
There could be rust. Rust is also known. There are false positives in cases of, I wouldn't say false positives because it's still blood, but animal blood can also be positive, but will produce no DNA results due to us having a human-specific DNA testing kit, but they can still show presumptive positive blood.
And in reference to these findings, we can't necessarily date whether that rust or animal blood or perhaps human blood had been there, correct?
That's correct.
Now, as to the other shoe, the whole shoe, presumptive negative.
The Mr. Gehrman's shoe?
No, we're talking about, we already addressed Mr. Garman's shoes, the Perry Topsiders.
I've only received, the naming that I have doesn't say which shoe is whole. I apologize. It says swab from interior side of left gray shoe. Is that the one that you?
Correct.
Okay, both of those for the interior left side of the gray shoe and the swab from the bottom of the left gray shoe were both negative presumptive for blood.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Can you be direct?
Just briefly, I just wanted to ask a couple of clarifying questions about the hat.
The hat and hat pieces, there's two parts of it, as I understand your testing. The first is you swab the lining of the hat to maybe get a wearer profile if you could.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then there was staining on the outside that you thought possibly could be blood, but when you tested it, it was negative presumptive for blood.
That's correct, yes.
And so the outside that was negative presumptive for blood, that wasn't moved forward for additional DNA testing. Is that fair?
That's correct. And the stains are still available on the hat for additional testing if necessary.
Okay, but the wearer profile that maybe you'd get from the lining, that was further tested for DNA.
Yes, the swabbing taken from the inner lining was taken forward for lab.
Oh,
processing.
good.
Thank you. I have nothing else, Sean.
Maybe someone will interpret those results for us.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You
Love
may
it.
step down and you are excused from your subpoena. Thank you for being here. And the state may call the next witness.
Kimberly Dannenberger.
Okay, there was some pretrial kerfuffle about this witness. Oh, DK, thanks for coming in with the 20. Says, can't emphasize how much I appreciate the thorough work done by the investigators and crime scene specialists. Definitely refreshing. Boss baby trying to act like he's hearing all this for the first time. So laughable.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action
Thanks,
shall be
Dee.
the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Kimberly Dannenberger, Kimberly Dannenberger.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Ms. Dannenberger, how are you employed?
I'm employed with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Forensic Laboratory in the Biology DNA section.
How long have you worked there?
I have worked at the Forensic Laboratory for approximately 15 and a half years, and I've been within the Biology DNA section for approximately 13 and a half years.
And what is your job title?
I'm a forensic scientist.
Okay, and you've done that for 15 years, is that about right?
I've been doing casework for the past 12. So part of that 13 and a half years and then within the biology DNA section included training.
Okay. What is your educational background?
All right, another beautiful woman on the stand. We don't make fun of witnesses or, say mean things about their looks. We like to just talk about their testimony, their demeanor, but another beautiful woman we can compliment, right? Getting on the stand in the STEM field, a scientist. She's engaging. She's looking at the jury. She's making what could be difficult topics seem easy and simple, quick, to the point. Blown away already by this case. This is witness number 18. We're on day number 3. Scott Bolton says that the defendant makes so many poses like little orphan Annie, and it just cracks me up because now every time I look at him, I'm going to be singing, "It's a hard knock life for him," and that I can't unsee. So thank you, Scott, for making me laugh today. I appreciate you. I appreciate each and every one of you who make us laugh every day. And Schrodinger's jury verdict room. Look at that, coming in with a 25. That is so nice of you. So they feel like I'm watching an episode of Bones compared to what we witnessed in the Dedham court. Preach. Thank you for your generosity. Back to our witness, Kimberly Dannenberger, forensic scientist, who's probably going to connect the dots for us on who this DNA belongs to.
Background that allows you to work as a forensic scientist?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in cell and molecular biology. I also completed an approximate 16-month training program within the biology DNA detail. And that training program encompassed everything that I would need to do my job. So analyzing items of evidence, putting them through a series of lab processing steps, generating DNA profiles, making interpretations on those DNA profiles, making comparisons to any known individuals who have been submitted for that case, as well as report writing and generating statistics.
Okay. And have you testified before as an expert in the area of forensic science, specifically with regard to DNA?
I have testified before, yes.
How many times do you think you've testified?
Prior to today, I've testified 87 times.
Okay.
87.
Can you give us just kind of an overview of how DNA is used in a forensic setting?
So just a little background, DNA does stand for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is what makes us who we are. It's the building blocks for each of us. So between two humans, approximately 99.9% of our DNA is the same, coding for everything that our body needs to do to function. It's that approximate 0.1% that makes us unique. So type of analysis that I am doing is within that 0.1%. So coding for eye color, hair color, skin color, what makes each of us unique. So DNA analysis is looking at that kind of portion. We target very specific locations, but ultimately swabbings or samples are taken from items of evidence submitted to a series of lab processing steps to generate a DNA profile.
Okay. And a person's DNA profile, is it the same regardless of where a sample is from versus like a buccal swab versus blood? Would those reveal on the same person the same DNA profile?
Yeah, so depending on, DNA does persist throughout your body. So if I have a sample of blood and a sample of saliva, if it does come from the same person, will be the same DNA profile.
Okay. And what is meant by the term reference sample?
So reference sample is what we use in the laboratory to describe an item of evidence known as typically a buccal swab kit, but it's an item of evidence collected for the purposes of DNA from a known individual. So based on who the outside packaging says was collected from, we can say that this profile came from this individual.
Okay. Now, with regard to this particular case, did you prepare a series of reports with regard to various items of evidence that were collected in the Gehrman murder case?
Look at this guy. Hold on.
Okay.
Look at this guy in the back row. He's like this. He's like this. He's like practically like laying there like he's at the beach. Dude, you're on camera. What are you doing back there? Oh, there's never a dull moment in this chat.
Now, with and did they span over several months?
Yes, in total, yes.
Okay. Now, when on some of the reports, we've heard testimony from two forensic technologists that they handled particular items of evidence and ran it through DNA processing. I assume on those items of evidence, you analyzed the data.
Yes, so for each of the reports that were authored, I was the analyst that did all the interpretation, regardless of who did the front end processing and or sample collection.
Did you ever work with any of the original evidence or like evidence where you were the person doing sort of the sampling and that sort of thing?
For the original report, I did not have hands on the actual items of evidence. I did do part of the lab processing.
Okay, and with regard to the lab processing, what did you do? What items did you work on?
So we're talking about the original report, correct?
Well, actually, yeah, like I'll back up. We'll just go in order.
Okay.
Let's start with your original report.
Okay.
And it was issued on, do you know what date?
May I refer to the report?
Thank you, Your Honor.
So the original report for this event number was issued on September 5th, 2022.
Okay. And so when you issued this report on September the 5th of 2022, there were various items of evidence that a forensic technologist took samples from that you later looked at the data and analyzed. Is that fair?
Yes, I did the analysis for these items.
Okay. And those items include a reference sample from Jeffrey Gehrman, right hand fingernail clippings, left hand fingernail clippings, a swab from the right hand, a swab from the left hand, swab from left ankle, and a swab from left foot, correct?
Yes.
At that time, on September the 5th, did you have a reference sample from Robert Tellis?
I did not.
Okay. So in this report, the only evidence that Metro was in possession of on September the 5th was these, well, there were probably other swabs impounded, but there was no reference sample for Robert Tellis yet obtained. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, so let's talk about this first report and what your findings were. I want to talk about the
Wasn't me.
left hand, the right hand, the left ankle, and the left foot. With regard to those items or those swabs, what were your findings with regard to DNA?
So referencing those items, referring to my report, those 4 items, the results were assuming Jeffrey Gehrman is a contributor, foreign DNA was not detected.
Okay, and with the left hand fingernail clippings, what was the finding with regard to that?
So for the swabbing from the left hand fingernail clippings, the conclusions were assuming Jeffrey Gehrman is a contributor, the DNA profile is consistent with a mixture, including at least 1 male. Due to the limited nature of the foreign component, it is unsuitable for interpretation and no further conclusions can be made.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that, just so we're clear. So this, the left hand fingernail clippings.
Oh no. Karen says we're under 500 likes currently. Oh no, we can't have that. We're over 1,300 people in here. Come on, my friends, close the chat. If you're on your phone, hit the like button. It's only fair. A lot of work sitting up here making you guys laugh, you know? A lot of work. All you gotta do is hit that like button. It's free. Helps the algorithm so that people that want to watch this trial can find us. Because, you know, we're a little small channel. Or I'll turn off the air conditioning. Turn off the air conditioning. Love you. Yeah, she's very poised and confident. Wait, so what was the first item she tested? I don't want to rewind it. We're talking about the fingernail clippings.
The DNA evidence was analyzed, and I think you said there was evidence of a mixture. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
How does that look different when you have a mixture as opposed to a single source of DNA?
So when I'm doing DNA analysis, the profiles that I'm looking at, they're equivalent to like peaks on a graph. So visually, you can just visualize peaks on a graph. So when a sample is single source, depending on the number of peaks that I see and the data itself, I can make the conclusion this is from a single person. The more peaks that are added, I can then conclude that this is from a mixture DNA profile. So the mixture part is dependent upon the profile itself.
Okay, and in this case, there was an indication of a mixture, but I think you said it can't be interpreted further?
Yeah, so for this sample, a mixture was indicated. I was able to assume Jeffrey Gehrman on this sample. It's what we consider an intimate sample, so fingernail clippings from a person's body. There's a reasonable assumption that their DNA profile can be there. In this case, his profile was there. So the peaks that are left over, there wasn't enough for me to make any further conclusion. It's limited, so I can't do anything further.
Okay, and that's just sometimes how DNA turns out? You get data that can't be interpreted further just because of the nature of the sample?
Correct.
And are there factors that affect that, or it just depends on how it's collected or what is collected, or environmental factors, anything like that?
There are lots of factors that can affect DNA analysis in general. I'm never going to know what kind of profile I'm going to get until I actually run the samples through our processing steps to generate a DNA profile. But in terms of what can factor in, amount of contact between 2 items, was it left out in the elements? These are just generalized factors, not specific to this case.
Sure.
Has there been any chemicals applied since, the contact may have occurred? I think I said handling with something touching for a long period of time or just a short amount of time, any environmental factors such as being left out in the sun or rain, etc. So in terms of generally for DNA, there are a lot of factors that can affect how much DNA is potentially still on an item of evidence by the time it is swapped for analysis, either by crime scene or by someone at the laboratory.
And you can't tell from lab results what may have affected whether or not there was more sample left or more interpretable sample left.
Correct. DNA can answer the questions of who potentially was a contributor to this profile, if someone included or excluded. And I can answer the question as to where that profile came from, so the fingernail swabs, but I cannot answer timeline questions. I can't say how the DNA came to be on an item of evidence, when it came to be on an item of evidence, and why.
Okay, so let's go back to the September 5th report. of 2022, you also analyzed the right-hand fingernail clippings swab, correct?
Yes.
And what was your conclusion with regard to that on September the 5th?
So on September 5th, the interpretation was this was a mixture of two males. I did assume Jeffrey Gehrman. Again, these were fingernail clippings collected from his person, so there was a reasonable assumption that he was there given the data. And so the conclusions at that time on September 5th were assuming Jeffrey Gehrman is a contributor to the mixture DNA profile obtained, foreign DNA was detected.
Okay, and did you have enough DNA in that case to have a possible profile for that foreign DNA?
Yes.
Did you know whose it was?
No, at this time, I only had one reference standard that had been submitted to the laboratory, and that was Jeffrey Gehrman.
So you have kind of this unknown profile associate, or well, in the same sample data as Jeffrey Gehrman's profile. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you have an identifiable profile, but you don't know whose it is, are there databases that you can enter a profile in?
There are, yes. If the sample itself meets eligibility, then there are databases that we can use.
And was that profile entered into databases?
It was, yes.
And which one, I mean, just generally, can you tell us which ones it was entered into?
This profile was searched, you're talking about the level, I'm sorry.
Of the identifiable foreign DNA profile, was that entered into any databases to see if it matched anything?
It was, yes.
And those would be national and local databases?
So for this case, it was able to be searched at a local level, a state level, as well as a national level.
And in all those databases, did you get any results about who could possibly be the source of that profile?
At that time, I did not know.
Okay, so let's move on to
Because he wasn't in the system
7th.
yet.
You ended up preparing 2 reports on September the 7th of 2022. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so let's, I think, start with what items of evidence you actually received on September the 7th. On that date, did you receive a reference sample?
So, sorry, yes. So this is referencing supplemental number 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So first of that, September 7th, 2022, this is referencing my report as supplemental 2. I did receive a reference standard from Robert Tellis.
Okay, and that came to you in the form of an evidence envelope?
Yes, it came in the form of what's called a buccal swab kit. That is going to be a swabbing of the inside of one's cheek.
And September the 7th is the first day, I assume, that you had a sample from Mr. Tellis?
Yes.
So did you analyze that particular item, or did you actually process it, do the forensic processing of that buccal swab?
So for this supplemental, I did work this case from beginning to end.
And were you able to generate a profile from Mr. Tellis's buccal swab?
I was, yes.
And did you ultimately compare that to that?
Oh, no way. No way. The guy that was like in the back, like he was sunbathing, is now standing up. And don't even tell me that he's a court officer. Hold on. Is that the same dude? Wait a second. Watch.
Were you able to generate a profile from Mr. Tellis's buccal swab?
Now he's
I
standing
was,
up.
yes.
And did you ultimately compare that to that unknown profile that came from the right fingernail clipping swab?
Yes, so this reference standard was compared to my original conclusions to that original data. So that comparison was done.
And what were your conclusions then?
So for the comparison of the buccal swab from Robert Tellis to the swabbing from the right-hand fingernail clippings, there was support. So Robert Tellis was included as a contributor to that profile. And the probability of observing the mixture DNA profile is approximately 40.9 septillion times more likely if it originated from Jeffrey Gehrman and Robert Tellis than if it originated from Jeffrey Gehrman and an unknown random contributor.
Those are
And can you kind of
pretty
explain
big odds.
why DNA is reported out?
Look at his
as a
face. He's
probability
smiling.
or-
What? You're smiling? She just used you in the same sentence as septillion. Okay. I don't even know how many zeros, or maybe septillion is, dude. But you are within septillions. You and Jeffrey Gehrman's DNA found under Jeffrey Gehrman's fingernails. How are you laughing right now? Watch this.
Than if it originated from Jeffrey Gehrman and an unknown random contributor.
And can you kind of explain why DNA is reported out as a probability or give us some context for that number?
So this number is what we call a likelihood ratio statistic, and it's the probability of the evidence. So it all relates back to the evidence. So the probability of the evidence, which is that swabbing from the right-hand fingernail clippings, compared to two different competing scenarios. So scenario one is that this DNA profile came from Jeffrey Gehrman and Robert Tellis. And scenario two is that this profile came from Jeffrey Gehrman and someone unknown, random. I don't have another buccal swab kit for them. So the probability of that evidence, given these two competing hypotheses, is the statistic. So there's more weight for the hypotheses or the scenario that it's Robert Tellis and Jeffrey Gehrman versus Jeffrey Gehrman and an unknown random contributor.
And that ratio, or that is numerically 40.9 septillion more times?
So that was the statistic, that the probability of the mixture profile is 40.9 septillion more times more likely if it's that scenario that I just talked about.
Okay. And that was reported out in one supplemental report from September the 7th. Is that correct?
Yes, that was all done on September the 7th. And again, that was using the original data that was reported out on September 5th.
Okay. And that evidence was originally, that evidence was worked by your colleague, Anastasia Barton.
Yes, so the report for September 5th, she was the one that had basically eyes on the evidence. She was the one that sampled from the evidence. She did start the lab processing steps that we go through. I did take over part way in the lab processing steps, so I did finish the lab processing and wrote the report. But she was the one that had the evidence. I never actually saw the physical evidence.
Okay, so you never handled the fingernail clippings, right hand, anything like that. You just have the data from that.
Yes, so I never handled the actual evidence.
Okay. Now I want to move on to your second report.
Okay, Rachel Henderson was the first wicked smart chick to pop in here to say that there are 24 zeros in a septillion. Rachel, are you a wicked smart woman in STEM? I love that. I love that for you. A couple of other people said it too. You guys are wicked smart.
From September the 7th, and it appears these were rocks with staining collected from the crime scene. There were 2 rocks and a swab from a bird bath.
Yes.
I'm going to put on the overhead states 149. And those were identified to you as AB1, is AB2 and AB6. Is that correct?
Yes, based on the impound information.
Okay,
Yes.
right. A crime scene analyst collects it from the field, and then you have their label. Is
Yes,
that right?
yes.
You're not going out to the field.
No, this is all based on the crime scene analyst, the description of their packaging.
Okay, and AB1 is described to you as a circular rock with staining, and AB2 is a rectangular rock with staining, and swab from AB6 is from a bird bath.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, let's talk about those 3 swabs. What were your conclusions with regard to them?
So all 3 of those items, so the rocks, I actually did the sampling myself. So I was the one that swabbed those 2 items, and then the swab was given to me. So crime scene swabbed on scene. All 3 of those items were consistent with 1 male contributor, and Jeffrey Gehrman was included as a contributor on each of those items.
Was there any indication of a mixture on those items?
The conclusions for these were 1 male.
Okay, so you prepared another report, and this one I think was from, September 12th of 2022. Is that right?
That is correct, and this is supplemental 3.
Okay, so let me just make sure I have these items. And these items consist of what was identified to you as a left gray shoe, interior side, the bottom of a left gray shoe, partial right gray shoe, pieces of black rubber, and swabs from handles of scissors and a swab from a knife. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so let's talk about those. I apologize. I'm putting on the overhead states 274.
They apologize. They're like,
263.
for, wasting 3 seconds of the court's time. You never get to hear the judge, Megan Mullally, character voice of Karen in Will and Grace, ever. I'm disappointed.
So let's talk about the what was identified to you as the interior side of the left gray shoe. Were you able to get interpretable data from that?
Sorry, let me just referencing my report. So for the swab from the interior side of the left gray shoe, that was consistent with originating from one male contributor.
And were you able to include Mr. Tellis as the source?
Yes, he was included as a contributor to that profile.
And
Uh-oh.
are you able to give us any kind of numerical context that similar to what you described for the right hand fingernail clippings?
Yes, so the probability of observing this DNA profile is approximately 1.34 octillion times more likely if it originated from Robert Tellis than if it originated from an unknown random contributor.
Okay. You also were,
Ruh-roh. Were those German sneakers or his sneakers? Now I'm confused because it looked like there were some pieces in the bag. There were some pieces next to it. Was that the cheap Nike shoe from Marshalls or Ross? Refresh my recollection.
Probability of observing this
I'm
DNA
assuming.
profile is approximately 1.34 octillion times more likely if it originated from Robert Tellis than if it originated from an unknown random contributor.
okay. You also were dealing with, I guess this would be your lab item 15, a swab from the interior side of the partial right gray shoe.
Yes,
And I'll put on the overhead states 272. What was your finding with regard to that, the interior of that?
so the swab from the interior side of the partial right gray shoe was consistent with one male contributor, and Robert Tellis was included as a contributor to that profile.
And was Mr. Garriman excluded from being a contributor on that shoe?
Yes,
You also analyzed or had data on black, white, and gray rubber. Is that right?
yes, referencing lab item 16.
And what were your findings with regard to that?
So that was consistent with one male contributor, and Robert Tellis was included as a contributor to that mixture,
And
or excuse me, that profile.
And how about Mr. Garriman?
He was excluded.
So
I want to put on the overhead.
Tellis's blood was on Tellis's shoes, but no Gehrman blood on Tellis's shoes so far.
States 261 and 259, which are reported to you as swabs from some scissors. And they're labeled to you as AB5 and 6. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
What were your findings with regard to the scissors?
Love Auntie Deb.
So both of those were consistent with originating from one male contributor, and Robert Tellis was included as a contributor to that those profiles.
Okay. Was Mr. Garriman excluded?
Yes.
Let's talk about swabs from a hat that was identified to you as from a hat. This is states 285. Did you look at DNA data generated from a swab from this, well, identified to you as swabs from this hat?
Yes.
And what were your findings there?
So this would be lab item 20.1, swabbing from the inner hat pieces. The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 5 contributors, with at least 2 of those being male. Due to the complexity of the data, no additional conclusions can be made regarding this mixture profile.
And when you say complexity of the data, in non-scientific terms, does that mean there's just too much information there to make it interpretable? Or how, in your words, how would you put it as a scientist?
So based on the data that was obtained, there was an indication that there are at least 5 people present on this item of evidence. So once we hit the point where there's at least 5, that profile becomes too complex for us. I cannot make any comparisons to any known reference standards, so I did not compare either Jeffrey Garriman's DNA or Robert Tellis's DNA to this item of evidence. Once it was 5 people, at that point, the interpretation stops. It is too complex.
Okay, and that's because there's just no indicator, there's I guess, a danger of interpreting data like that. It might not be reliable scientifically because there's just so much information, or?
Yeah, we can kind of relate it to there's just too much information, and also it relates back to based on.
He thinks this is really good for him. He's like, okay, there were 5 contributors to the DNA on the inside of that hat because maybe a whole bunch of people tried it on in the store, or he stole it from, somewhere that many people had worn it, so they couldn't link him to the hat. He thinks this is good for him, I think. Let's watch his facial expressions.
Validation data, and there's just too much.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to, I think your last report was from January 2nd of 2024.
Yes.
And you were given swabs from a vehicle, and then some swabs from clothing, and then also swabs that are reported to you as from some bushes at the crime scene.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so all the vehicle swabs, were you able to analyze the data as to those?
Yes, so every item of evidence that was sampled for this report did go on to DNA analysis, so DNA profiles were generated.
And what were the findings with regard to the swabs from the vehicle?
Did you want me to go through each?
Sure.
One? Okay. So referencing lab item 27, which is a swab from the interior driver door handle hole area. Assuming Robert Tellis is a contributor, the DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture, including at least one male contributor. Due to the limited nature of the foreign data, it's unsuitable for interpretation, and therefore no further conclusions can be made.
Okay. The next one, well, actually, let me just do it this way. It might be a little shorter. In all of the vehicle swabs, was Mr. Garriman excluded from all of those?
He was either excluded or what we call uninformative.
Okay. And when it's uninformative, can you explain for the members of the jury what that means?
Yes. So uninformative, when I have that reference standard and I'm comparing it to the evidence profiles, we generate a statistic. So that's similar to the statistic that I've already talked about. If that statistic falls into a certain range, it's in what we call an uninformative range. So I can't say, yes, this person is included as a contributor to this profile. And I also cannot say, yes, they are excluded as a contributor to this profile. It's a range where we just can't say one way or the other if they're included or excluded. And that all relates back to the statistical number that was generated for that comparison.
Okay. And is there any further testing that can be done that would clarify that, or this is just kind of what we're left with the data that we have?
As of right now, this is the interpretation that was made and the statistic that was generated.
Okay. And though that includes all the swab, well, to some degree, like you kind of made some distinction that some of them were uninformative, but it's fair to say that there is never a positive identification of Jeffrey Garriman's DNA in the Yukon.
Correct. Jeffrey Garriman's DNA was not found to be individually included or support for inclusion based on the statistic in any of those swabs that came from the car.
Okay. And some of them were uninformative, so we don't know, we can't say he's included or excluded due to the sort of limitations on the data.
Correct. There's not sufficient support for either way.
Okay. So I'm going to put on the overhead now states 166. And these are other items that you analyze, which are Sperry shoes, a right shoe, a left shoe, a shirt, and some shorts.
Correct.
With regard to those items of evidence, were you able to generate data and draw conclusions?
Yes. So for all, pardon me, I'm referencing my report. For all the items of evidence from these items of clothing, so just to reference, that's going to be lab items 35, 36, 37, 38, the clothing samples. Those were all consistent with one male contributor, and Jeffrey Garriman was included as a contributor to those profiles, and Robert Tellis was excluded.
Okay, so the DNA that is gathered off of these clothing items that we've discussed was consistent with one person, and that was Mr. Garriman?
Yes.
Okay, lastly, in that last report, there were swabs that were taken from 2 bushes and a butterfly. Is that right?
Yes.
And I'm going to put on the overhead states 149. And those swabs were reported to you as AB3, AB4, and AB5.
Yes, that is correct.
And what were your findings with regard to those swabs?
These swabs were all consistent with originating from one male contributor. Jeffrey Gehrman was included as a contributor to those profiles, and Robert Tellis was excluded as a contributor to those profiles.
Thank you
So-
very much. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
He didn't stop. He didn't start bleeding until he was cutting up his shoes with the scissors.
All right, at this time, we're going to take a recess.
That's what I
During
said.
this recess, you're admonished not to discuss or communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, and waiver.
That's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? Court is on break. I mean to do that. Until 2 p.m. Eastern, which is only 5 minutes from now. So that wasn't much of a break. Oh, that they didn't have lunch yet. This is just the morning break. She does remind me of Mary Lou Henner. You too? You guys can do the commentary from now on because your comments are fire today. Susan Costello, thank you so much for the $20 super sticker. Guys are amazing. Iceman said, I thought opening and closing statements are not evidence. They're not, except you're only supposed to say things in your opening that you intend to prove. So whatever you say in your opening, you should have a good faith basis for saying that the evidence will show. The evidence will show that there was no blood on the sneakers, which we clearly just heard from this witness, that there was blood on the sneakers. And it was his blood, right? His blood was on his own sneakers, though. So I can't recall exactly what the defendant's attorney said in his opening now. So I have to think about that a little bit more. Jennifer says it makes sense that if he was cutting up the sneakers and the hat with his right hand, his left hand would get cut in the process. That absolutely makes sense. Whoever said could have at least worn gloves when cutting up his shoes. He was probably super drunk. Well, remember that the body cam footage that we looked at during our pretrial shallow dive on this, during the domestic, the guy was hammered. And then during his jailhouse interview, that was a couple years before this incident, on his jailhouse interview, he says that he doesn't drink anymore, but he has ADHD and he was a fat kid and he was trying to blame all his problems on that and everyone else who was after him and surveilling him and trying to ruin his marriage and his. I mean, we're on witness number, according to my calculations, not octillion. This is 18, witness 18. Are they going to call the women from the office to testify? I need the women to testify about his abusive, toxic behavior in the workplace. Having backseat meetings with one of the women from the office, one of his subordinates. Right? Yeah, how many people wore that straw hat in Florida? Did a bunch of people try it on before he hoss many people, Andrea? I see what you did there. Hoss, I almost didn't even see it. Hoss many people wore that straw hat in Florida. And then we saw the guy from the sewer company who passed him in his wife's alleged red Denali. And they wear the same outfit. So he'd been casing the joint, driving around the neighborhood because, again, didn't one of the detectives say they had him on surveillance or that car or a car that looks like that car in the neighborhood before the day? And that sewer work had been going on throughout the month of August. And that's the outfit that they wore with the hat and the shirt and the. So, yeah, those hats are very common. We need the women from the office. I'm here for all the tea. Me too. We're on witness 18, so please tell me they're going to call them. Yeah, I don't know. Is it not going to be allowed to come in? But it goes to motive, because Gehrman wrote those articles based on what those women told him that was going on in the office, and it all goes to motive. So I don't know. They were on the 48 Hours episode that I linked in one of the channel descriptions. Maybe they could be rebuttal witnesses, CW. That's a good point. Terry says the defense inferred there was no blood. And Terry, I saw what you were putting in there before about law enforcement, and I'm not going to stand for everyone dissing all law enforcement either, because we back the blue 100% on this channel. And, you know, most cops are excellent. Most law enforcement is excellent. There are a couple of bad ones, just like there are bad lawyers, bad doctors, bad priests. But we certainly cannot put all law enforcement into one category of being terrible, because that's not true. So I agree with you on that. But he said he stopped drinking, didn't he, in that jailhouse interview? I don't know. He's been in. It's been in the pokey since his arrest in September of 2022. So I know you can get certain things in jail. I don't know if you can get booze. Can you? I don't know. Jason said, which is how we knew that Yannetti had receipts for all that stuff that he said in his opening. Yep. Yeah, Prince Lover. And Lally made stuff up in his opening that wasn't there. Just like they did also, I believe, in Ashley Benefield's case. Didn't they start throwing some stuff into their closing? Those evil stepsisters from Cinderella. That wasn't in evidence. 2 traumatic trials in a row. And now we have this. This is our palate cleanser. It's our palate cleanser. The blood on the sneakers wasn't Germans. Makes sense that if he's cutting up the sneakers with his, and the hat was right in his left hand. I think I highlighted that one already. Thank you, Andrea Collins, for becoming a new member, and welcome, welcome, welcome to you. We think he had gloves on. I think he did have gloves on in those photos, right? When he's walking down the street, Kristen? I thought he did too. Yeah, we need more likes. Thank you, Scott Messerschmidt. Let's see what we're up to now. We're still waiting for them to come back from break. Court is on a break currently. Yeah, we're only at 50% likes, you guys. We got to get more than that. So let's do that. If you wouldn't mind, it really helps the channel and the algorithm and all those crazy things that YouTube takes into consideration when they decide to push out your video and recommend it to people who are interested in watching this subject. Gabby says no victim DNA on any of Tellis's clothes or car. No, I don't believe so. But he was not arrested until however many days later. The killing was on the 2nd. He was arrested, I think, on the 8th or the 7th, at least 5 days. So the only items they recovered were the hat, the sneakers from Marshalls or Ross that were like cheap Nikes, according to our favorite witness, Zachary, yesterday, who said that he was a bit of a fashionista. So he noticed that Telly's had these cheap Nike sneakers, and that's how he knew when he saw the video on TV that that was probably him, because of his cheap Ross, Marshalls, Nikes. No, but Telly's DNA was in the fingernail clippings of Jeff Gehrman's right hand. So there's that. Correct. Yes, Mel. Right fingernail clippings. Correct. I'll go back to my notes. Yeah, that's when we heard. That's when Septillion entered the chat. You have some bad, and for the most part, they're good, just like everyone else, good and bad. Talking about law enforcement. Yep. 100%. No, they didn't find the construction vest. I don't even know if it was a vest or was it like an orange shirt. I think it was more of a long sleeve shirt. I don't think it was a vest. Yeah, isn't it, Crime Mom? It's so nice to watch a professional trial compared to the Karen Reed trial. I mean, they're getting right to the point on day 3. We've heard everything. They're back. Liz, I think he wants to testify. I think he's going to testify come hell or high water. He's been saying it during all the pretrial stuff. He wants to tell his story. He's going to explain to us and the jury why he thinks he's being framed and who did it. And, you know, he's a lawyer. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. Thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. And I think he's going to testify. I really do. And I'm here for it. We're here for it. This court runs on time. They do full days. They're taking testimony till 5 p.m., which is 8 p.m. East Coast time. So we get to sleep late, but we're here late too.
Please come to order, remain seated, court is now back in session.
Okay, does the state stipulate to the presence of the panel? Yes, Your Honor. And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may begin your cross-examination.
Thank you. Ma'am, is it fair to say that DNA can be recovered from a fairly small sample?
Yes,
Blood carries a fair amount of DNA as compared to other bodily fluids, skin cells such as that.
yes. Blood, what we consider that a biological fluid, and that does typically have more DNA present than, like you just mentioned, skin cells or something sloughing on.
Okay, when we talk about skin cells, those are epithelial cells?
They are referred to epithelial cells and or skin cells. There's cells all over our body, and within those cells is where the DNA resides. So our skin is constantly sloughing off as well.
And are you able to determine the source of the DNA that you test? And meaning, did it come from blood? Did it come from semen? Did it come from epithelial cells, saliva? Are you able to make that determination?
My analysis cannot give the source of that DNA profile.
But just so we're clear though, is it your opinion that blood is perhaps the richest carrier of DNA? It's the best vehicle to.
Wait, Draskovich, are you going to say that his semen on Jeff Garman? Because come on now.
To preserve and to transport DNA.
Biological fluids, to include blood,
Thanksgiving.
semen, and saliva, all are good. They all contain good amounts of DNA. So we typically expect there to be a lot of DNA. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm never going to know what that profile looks like until the analysis is actually done. But biological fluids do contain more DNA.
We'll start with what's up on the overhead projector. This is State's Exhibit 149.
Okay.
You had tested, it was the rocks and the bird bath, correct?
Yes, there were rocks and various swabs, I believe, within this diagram that were submitted for forensic testing.
And so we're clear, there were no findings concerning the reference sample, that being Mr. Tellis.
For referencing that last report?
Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 166. This was the clothing that was taken from the body of Mr. Garman. Same question. There was no DNA consistent with that of Mr. Tellis found on the shoes.
Correct. He was excluded as a contributor.
Underwear, same question.
Same answer. Yes, he was excluded.
The shorts.
He was excluded.
The t-shirt.
Also excluded.
Turning your attention to the latter part of your testimony concerning the swabs that were obtained from the subject vehicle. You had testified that swabs were taken from the interior driver door of the vehicle. That would be impound item number 1, item number 27.
sorry, I'm just referencing my report, so I don't
Please do,
misspeak.
yes.
I apologize. Yes, so impound item 1, yes, swab from the interior driver door handle pull, yes,
There was, number one, a negative presumptive blood test, correct?
correct.
So there was no presumptive, there was a negative test on the presumptive blood test from that item number 27, impound item number 1.
That
Correct.
is correct. It was a negative presumptive test for blood.
As impound item number 2, and that would be item number 28 from the lab item, that was taken from the driver's seatbelt and the buckle from the vehicle, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Again, there was a negative presumptive blood finding.
That is correct.
And again, no DNA.
For item 28, lab item 28, DNA profile was obtained, but as I mentioned earlier, assuming Robert Tellis, that foreign component was too limited.
And again, concerning Mr. Garman, there was no DNA found concerning, from the reference sample that you had concerning Mr. Garman, correct?
Correct. I didn't even compare Jeffrey Gehrman's DNA to lab item 28 because the remainder, after I assumed Robert Tellis, the remainder is too limited. So there actually was no comparisons, but yes.
In reference to lab item number 29, impound item number 3, swab from the steering wheel. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And again, no findings of any meaning in reference to DNA concerning Mr. Garman.
Correct. He was uninformative, as I talked about earlier, for that sample.
Turning your attention to item number 30, that's the lab item. Impound item number 4, the swab from the gear shifter of the vehicle. Negative presumptive blood test.
Correct, yes.
And again, no DNA of any significance concerning Mr. Garman.
Correct. For lab item 30, the foreign component was too limited, so he wasn't even compared to that item.
Turning your attention to item number 31, that's the lab item. Impound item number 5, the swab from the gas pedal of the subject vehicle. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And again, in reference to the DNA sample, nothing for any meaningful comparisons.
Yes, for lab item 31, the sample as a whole was too limited, so there were no further interpretations.
Turning your attention to lab item number 32, impound item number 6. This is the swab from the brake pedal versus the gas pedal. Negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And again, no meaningful findings concerning DNA contributors.
Correct. For that item of evidence, lab item 32, Jeffrey Gehrman was uninformative.
Lab item number 33, impound item number 7, the swab for the interior front passenger handle door. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
Correct.
And again, we don't have Mr. Gehrman's DNA or any findings of any significance concerning Mr. Gehrman.
There's no indication that Gehrman was ever in the car. So, I mean, you can take all the spaghetti you want and throw it at the wall, but, shoe booties, he had gloves on. That's right. Inexplicable Susan. And so I don't know if they ever recovered the gloves. I don't believe they did. But I mean, here's what he's going to do. He's going to go through all the places the DNA was not found and then just leave out the part where Gehrman's DNA was found underneath Tellis's Tellis's DNA was found underneath Gehrman's right fingernails, right? Right. But that's okay. Go through
Correct. He was
everything.
excluded as a contributor.
Everywhere they didn't find it.
Lab item number 34, impound item number 9. That was a swab from the interior rear driver door handle pulled from the vehicle. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And no meaningful DNA findings concerning Mr. Gehrman.
Correct. That profile as a whole was limited, so there were no comparisons to it.
Turn your attention to State's Exhibit 285, this straw hat.
Okay.
No, just so we're clear, no presumptive blood tests of any significance. Nothing was conducted actually, but please.
So for the straw hat, referencing my report, excuse me, the pieces were impounded separately, and at the time this item was screened or examined, excuse me. There were a few areas that were screened for blood. They were all negative presumptive blood tests.
And again, same question concerning the sample reference to Mr. Gehrman, nothing. You
Correct.
said it was, I mean, there was a mixture of 5 or more.
Yes.
It was complex, but nothing felt, oh, there's blood or there's a finding or epithelial cells concerning Mr. Gehrman.
Correct. Item 20.1, there was no testing for presumptive blood for that sample. And as I mentioned earlier, it was too complex, so there were no comparisons made to that sample.
Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 272. This is the partial right shoe.
Okay.
No findings of DNA concerning the reference sample taken from Mr. Gehrman.
That is correct. For that sample, was excluded. Jeffrey Gehrman was excluded.
Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 263. Left shoe. As far as the presumptive blood test, negative.
Referencing lab items, so the left shoe is referenced for lab items 13 and 14. Both of those were negative presumptive blood tests.
And again, in reference to the sample from Mr. Gehrman, negative. Concerning the DNA.
Correct. He was
Excluded.
excluded, yes. And he was excluded from lab item 13, and actually lab item 14 was not taken forward for analysis.
Showing you what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit 274. In reference to the DNA reference sample from Mr. Gehrman, excluded, not included. There's no DNA from Mr. Gehrman found on these pieces.
Yes, I believe that is most likely the lab item 16 swab from piece of black, white, and gray rubber. And yes, you are correct. Jeffrey Gehrman was excluded.
State's Exhibit 261. These were the scissors. There was presumptive blood concerning the handles, correct?
Excuse
Top
me.
and bottom.
Yes, the scissors reference lab items 17 and 18. They were initially identified as AB5 and AB6. Both of those were positive presumptive for apparent blood.
But when compared to the sample reference taken from Mr. Gehrman, excluded.
Yes.
That's interesting. Leanne says Gehrman may not have bled out on Tellus. It may have been internal. Plus, if he was face down, he was face down, and most of the blood may have been underneath him. We didn't see the crime scene photos. The jury saw them, so we don't know how bloody the scene was, but that's a great point.
I'm showing you what's been marked and admitted. I can anticipate your answers, but I want to just show you this. This is a bag found from the residence of Mr. Tellus. Was anything submitted to you to perform an analysis, either presumptive blood or DNA?
For this bag, no.
Based upon your working with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, would you assume that had there been a presumptive finding, I would have been submitted for further analysis?
Those sorts of decisions are made outside of the purview of my job. So that would be dependent upon the requesting detective or officer who submitted it. So there was nothing that was submitted. So I don't have an answer for that. Unfortunately, I don't know why, yes or no.
Fair enough, but as far as to your review of the documents, there's no presumptive blood tests that were conducted upon that bag, correct?
I did not review crime scenes report. So if there was, I don't know.
And again, you were never called upon to render an opinion as to any DNA evidence found upon this bag.
Correct. There was no samples from that bag or the bag itself that were submitted for analysis. What was submitted is what has been discussed today.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Did you say no?
No, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony today. You may step down if you're excused from your subpoena. Thank you very much for being here. You may call your next witness.
Dan Cullen.
I want to see that the court officer is at it again, or the bailiff.
Remain standing.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Daniel Kulin, DanielKulin.
We have proceed, Your Honor.
Good morning, sir.
Hi.
Hi. Sir, where were you working back in 2022?
Clark County Communications Office.
And what is the Clark County Communications Office responsible for?
Handling requests from the media and other communications efforts for the county.
Okay, so occasionally members of the media may request information from the county and it's done through the communications office?
Yes,
Are those called public records requests?
they can be. Yeah.
Okay, that's one form of them.
Mhm.
And so, oh,
Yes,
sorry.
I'm
thank-
sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. So if you were a member of the media and you wanted to make a public records request, would you go or contact the communications office, or what would the procedure be?
So you would probably call and talk to us about it. And then depending on what the request is, you could also submit an email to kind of put it in writing.
Okay, and are those types of requests, or I guess I should say, did your office receive, when you were working there, several requests or many requests from various reporters on a range of topics?
Yes, frequently.
Was one of those requesters a reporter by the name of Jeff Gehrman?
Yes,
And I think you said they could call or they could email a request to the office.
yes.
Once the communications office receives the request, what happens with that request on the county side?
Well, it depends what they're requesting. So for example, if they're asking for an email search, the procedure would be to communicate that request to the DA's office as well as IT department, the department and the individuals that are the subject of the request also, and then to proceed to collect the information.
Okay, so if I did a request or a reporter did a request for emails of, I would assume this would be county employees.
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Your office or where you were working back then would receive the request, is that correct?
Correct,
And then the request, you said would go to the DA's office.
correct.
And I assume that's the civil division of the DA's office, not the criminal division.
Correct,
And then you said the IT department, is that right?
yes,
Because I assume that's the department that's going to collect email or electronic data.
correct,
And then your office would be in the mix on that as well?
correct. We facilitate the request, serve as the person or the office that's in communication with the reporters.
And then the person whose email is being requested, are they notified, hey, there's been a public records request for your email?
Yes,
And,
Yeah, that's a problem
notification-
because Jeff Gehrman, the investigative reporter who is sadly the victim in this case, was making FOIA requests for Rob Tellis's emails, and Tellis would have been notified. So it's going to be interesting to see when these FOIA requests were made. That's the purpose of this witness.
Notification would be made by the communications office usually?
typically, yes,
Okay, and I assume then the IT department gathers whatever might be the subject of the request?
correct.
And then what happens to the data that they gather?
So let's say that it was a request for emails. Once the IT folks have collected all of the potentially relevant documents, they would get reviewed by DA Civil and the communications office to be prepared to be released to the reporter.
Okay, and are there occasions when the civil division of the DA's office may hold back a record or refuse to produce a record for various reasons?
Correct.
After that, are the records that are going to be produced given to the subject of the request?
Yes,
And then they're allowed to review them before they go out to, say, the reporter?
they could.
He got a heads
And
up.
then after that, I assume they're released to the reporters.
Correct.
Are there numerous requests going through the communications office all the time?
Yes, there were when I was there.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach? I've shown Mr. Draskovich what's been marked as 339 and 340. Thank you. Sir, I'm going to show you State's Exhibits 339 and 340. Do you recognize those two documents?
Yes, these are emails that we received or
Okay.
that I sent.
With respect to 340, that appears to be an email from Jeff Gehrman. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that appears to be a request for public records. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then with respect to 339, those look like an email and then a response to an email. Is that fair?
Correct.
And you're the sender of the email and then you receive an email back. Is that correct?
Yes.
State moves to admit 339 and 340.
Okay.
May I publish these, Your Honor? Thank you. I'm putting on the overhead what's been admitted as 340. That looks a little bright. Are you able to see that on your screen there?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like it's an email from,
Wait, the verbal, or were you in court when they showed the crime scene photos and he was face up? That's interesting to me. Let me know if you were in the courtroom when they showed them or if you've seen them some other way.
Jeff Gehrman of the Review Journal. Is that fair?
Yes.
And the date is July 13th, 2022.
Correct.
And it was sent to Eric Papa.
Yes.
Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Who is that?
He was or is another staff member in the communications office. He was the director or
Okay.
is the director. Sorry.
And it appears that Mr. Gehrman says this is an open records request for all emails between Public Administrator Robert Tellis and Estate Coordinator Roberta Lee Kennett from January 1st of 22 to the date that the request is fulfilled. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Roberta is the woman he was having the backseat meetings with that there's video footage of that the other women in the office took. Surreptitious video of him having some backseat meetings in the backseat of her car in a shopping mall, perhaps parking garage, where they're both sitting in the backseat of her car and they both get out of the backseat of her car. She straightens her dress out. There's more than one of these meetings that were caught on tape. And Gehrman wrote about him in his articles. And Tellis then blamed him for ruining his marriage on Twitter. So here's the tea.
And he also is requesting communications, including between Tellis and Lee Kennett on Microsoft Teams for that same date span.
Yes.
What
Teams
is
messages
Microsoft
too.
Teams?
It's a computer program that allows you to send messages between.
Is it
people.
similar to email or it's
Yes.
just, okay. And then it looks like, please also provide all text messages between Tellis and Lee Kennett on their office and personal phones for that same date time period. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then as a reminder, he wrote, as you know, state law requires a response to open records requests within 5 business days. And then please call me if you have if there's a cost associated with it. Is that all correct?
Correct.
Do you remember?
Wait, hold on. Tracy, I think they showed a crime scene photo briefly in the prosecution's opening statement. If you blinked, you missed it. No, we saw it. We can't unsee it. But I thought that was an autopsy photo because it was an arm that looked like it was hanging off of a gurney or a hospital bed. So I didn't know that was a crime scene photo. Is that the one you're talking about? The one of the arm? It was gruesome.
This request coming through the communications office back in July of 22?
Yes.
And so would this request have followed that same procedure that you described where once this request came in, it would be forwarded on to IT to collect that electronic data?
Correct.
Also to the civil department of the county to see if they wanted to object to any part of it?
Yeah, correct.
And then also it would have been, the fact that the request had been made would have been conveyed to Mr. Tellis and Miss Lee Kennett?
Correct. And in addition, he's asking for things that might not be in our possession. So
Okay.
we would reach out to the subjects of the request so that they have an opportunity to provide anything that we might not have.
Okay, now I'm going to put on the overhead, and would those be the text messages from
Correct.
phones?
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh, hang on. We're gonna get some tea. We're
I'm
gonna
now
get some
putting on the
text
overhead
messages. Okay, Dewey, you must be behind because you're talking about different bags for different pieces of evidence. So you won't see this until later when you catch up. But thanks for the deuce. Here come the messages. Oh, and in this case, also, you guys, is gonna blow your mind. But celebrate is accurate. Imagine that. And they use different bags for different pieces of evidence.
339. And we'll start with, that's you sending an email on August the 8th of 22, is that correct?
Correct.
And you send an email to Mr. Tellis, looks like at almost 2 o'clock.
Correct.
And you say, Mr. Tellis, we've received a request from the Review Journal for emails between you and Michael Murphy from May 15th to July 13th, and between you and Rita Reed for those same dates. The reporter has also requested emails between you and Roberta Lee from January 1st to July 13th, as well as Microsoft Teams between the two of you. Those requests are in addition to text messages for that same time period. So you send out a notification to Mr. Tellis on August the 8th that this request was made.
Correct.
Now the request that we looked at just earlier from
August 8th. It's important to note the killing of Jeff Garman was September 2nd. Looks like Boss Baby got some splaining to do if his emails and his team messages come out between him and his backseat alleged lover, Roberta.
Mr. Gehrman, his emailed request. This email suggests that he was seeking additional communications from Mr. Murphy and Rita Reed. Are reporters allowed to call in and I guess adjust the request and say, well, I'm looking for more than what I emailed you?
That's possible, sure.
Okay, and it's, I guess what I'm saying is they don't have to fill out a form and be exact. They can just contact the office either by email or form and say, this is what I want.
That's correct, generally speaking. I mean, we worked a lot with Jeff over the years. So.
Okay, and did you actually know him personally?
Yes.
And had you worked with him prior to your working at the county?
Yes, we were reporters together at the Las Vegas Sun.
Okay, so you were, friends with him, or at least acquaintances, or maybe more than that.
Yes.
Okay, and would the communication between the county office and the reporters, especially ones that were frequent or that you knew, that was a pretty informal back and forth?
Yes.
Okay, and then it's after the request is made, that's where the civil department of the county weighs in and decides legally what they're going to produce or not produce?
Correct, before anything's turned over.
Okay, and then I'm just sort of going back to our exhibit 339. It looks like you receive a response from Mr. Tellis on that same date saying that I'd like to review those communications prior to them being sent. Please advise as to when I might be able to do so. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
He wants to
And
know how much
that
trouble
is
he's going to be in when all these emails and Teams messages get out, and he's racking his brain. He's racking his big giant brain inside his big giant head of Boss Baby Megamind. Like, what did I say over Teams? I hope it wasn't gross.
Part of the procedure that the county follows with regard to producing electronic data for reporters.
Correct.
The subject could review them.
When I was there, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
They're not going to show us the
Yes.
messages? Oh, man, what a tease. What a tease.
So turning your attention to State's Exhibit 340. This was the initial request that your attention was drawn to the July 13th, 2022 request from Mr. Gehrman.
Mhm.
You were to comply with this request within how many days?
We would communicate with the requester within 5 days and let them know how long it might take to respond.
And presumably upon receiving this notice from Mr. Gehrman on July 13th, you would have notified Mr. Tellis.
At some point, we would have notified him. The initial steps typically would be to communicate with the reporter to make sure that we're all understanding what they're looking for and see if there's anything that they would like to change or amend.
Do
Or
we have any
hide.
emails from you to Mr. Gehrman right around the 5-day period from July 13th, 2022, being the starting point?
I would have to search for those. I don't know right now.
Okay, but that would generally be your policy.
Well, it could be communication, we could be calling him or we could
Absolutely.
be emailing him.
And obviously, at this point in time, there was nothing out of the ordinary. You testified previously that you'd communicated with Mr. Gehrman before when he would request for records.
Correct.
So in this case, I mean, it was just the basically standard procedure. You receive a request, you communicate it to the person whose communications are being sought, and then you respond to Mr. Gehrman. Fair to say?
Well, it's more likely that we would communicate with the reporter first to make sure that we are, getting him or her what they want. For example, he's asking for, communications through the date that the request is filled.
Yes.
I probably would have called Jeff and asked him to, identify an end date, a specific end date.
And it's safe to assume that you did that.
It's likely, yes.
And then following that communication based upon your testimony, you would have communicated this request to Mr. Tellis.
Yes, at some point in the process, we would communicate to the subjects of the request.
In reference to the communication, the second communication that we have in writing on August 8th,
Mhm.
again, we have a larger request. He's asking for a broader scope of communications. The initial request was between Mr. Tellis and Miss Lee Kennett, correct?
The email that you just showed?
Yes,
Correct.
the 13th.
Mhm.
Yes?
Correct.
Okay. This request concerns communication between other individuals.
Correct.
In this point, we obviously have, it's safe to assume that you had spoken with Mr. Gehrman and now you're speaking with Mr. Tellis, correct?
Correct.
But digitally speaking with him, I mean, you sent an email.
Correct.
And his request to review these is normal course, nothing out of the ordinary.
It's not something that every subject of a request asks for, but it's not unheard of.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No, Your Honor, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down.
One question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're gonna stay right here for a minute. We have a question from a juror.
Jury has a question. They're going to be like, who's Roberta? Who's Roberta? Roberta was married at the time. According to Jeff's article, it says DK. Thanks, DK. Thanks, Kimmy. MAGA Stacker says, isn't it odd no one's DNA was found in the car? I think they said they did find his DNA in the car. On the driver's side door handle, they found Tellis's DNA and a mixture. They just didn't find any of Gehrman's DNA in the car, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Where's Chloe? There's a man passed out in the snow. There's a man passed out in the snow. It's my best Jen McCabe. A little bit behind. A little bit. He's trying to listen in. Remember, Ashley Benefield was given headphones so she could listen to the side bars. Oh, here's our. Oh man, Megan Mullally, our mashup of Cyndi Lauper, 90s Madonna, and Betsey Johnson, with the voice of Megan Mullally's character from Will and Grace. And we're not even going to let's get to hear her talk. Like vey. We'll fast forward a little bit.
But
Lee, you call, okay, we have a question.
All right, now we get to hear her speak.
Okay, we have a question from a juror that's been marked as sports exhibit number 14. Do you recall how many times Gehrman requested communications through you directly, and how often, weekly, monthly?
I couldn't give you an exact number, but Jeff was an investigative reporter, and so it was common for him to reach out and make public records requests. But I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number without researching it.
Okay, it's been marked and made part of the record as sports exhibit 14. Does the state have any follow-up?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Does the defense?
Yes. In reference to these requests, in other cases, you would have individuals assert a privilege or somehow try and bar the transference of the communications.
The subjects of the request?
Yes.
I can't recall specific instances of that occurring, but yes, that is something that has occurred. I'm not aware of it being successful though.
And in reference to these requests that were made by Mr. Gehrman, there were no objections or any attempts by Mr. Tellis to stop the transference of his communications, correct?
I don't recall.
Maybe.
Interesting. So it sounds like the juror wants to know, like, did he have it out for the defendant, Tellis, or is Gehrman, an investigative reporter that kind of like requests stuff all the time from the Clark County Comms office with regard to any other employee or other public official or other elected?
Okay, thank you
Officials?
very much for your testimony here today. You may step down. And you're excused from your subpoena. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
State may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Roberta Lee.
Oh, here she comes, Roberta. Backseat Roberta coming to the stand, you guys. This is going to be awesome. Wait, I'm going to put it on pause while she walks up to the stand. You may want to get your popcorn. You may want to get a drink. You may want to get whatever it is that you need to get for this, because this is going to be good. Roberta Lee Kennett, backseat Roberta, being called to the stand by the prosecution. And we are here for it. We've only seen her from behind in the videos where she got out the back seat of the car. Ready? Oh, spicy. Here we go. Backseat lover. Well, afternoon delight. A lot of songs come to mind here. What should we call her in the scrolling ticker? Now we're cooking with gas. Is she going to lie? I don't know. Is she going to say that they were having, just regular meetings in the back seat of the car, that he was just confiding in her as friends do, co-workers. He was her boss. Uh-oh, she's in the hall. She's like, I'm not coming in. I don't want to come in there. Everyone's watching this trial on YouTube. Give me some song suggestions. What pops into your head when you think of backseat lover? Oh, poor Roberta.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Roberta Lee Kennett. It's ROBERTA LEE-KENNETT.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Do you want me to call you Ms. Lee Kennett or Ms. Kennett?
Lee Kennett's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Lee Kennett, were you ever employed at the Public Administrator's Office?
Yes, I was.
And I'm sorry, but you have a soft voice. Can you just keep it up a little bit or
Sure.
pull that maybe a little
Okay.
closer?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Do you remember what year it was that you started working there?
I've been with the county 12, 13 years.
Okay.
You're still there?
Was that your first job at the county?
I worked for the public guardian's office first.
Public guardians and then public administrators?
Yep, a few
Oh.
years after that.
Okay. When you started working at the public administrator's office,
Yes.
who was the elected public administrator at that time?
That would have been John Cahill.
Okay. At some point, Mr. Cahill decides not to be the public administrator, and a new one comes in. Is that fair?
Yep.
And who was that?
Robert Tejas.
Okay. And you looked over at council table. Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you describe an article of clothing and point to him, please?
He's in a suit right there.
Like on
She's smiling while she looks at him. If you're not watching your screen, you may want to watch your screen now. And it's interesting that she calls him Tejas. She's using the Spanish pronunciation rather than Tellus, which is what he calls himself and everyone else calls him. And if they were, confidants / paramours / coworkers from the back seat, this is interesting. Is she getting immunity? I mean, I don't think she didn't do anything criminal. There's definitely some EEOC complaints against him. There's a federal lawsuit. We went over that during one of our pre-trials. Paradise by the dashboard light. There it is. Patriotic for the win. Some of the witnesses have been calling him Tejas. It's she's not the first. Here we go.
council table. Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you describe an article of clothing and point to him, please?
He's in a suit right there.
Like
A
on,
gray suit.
thank you. Thank you. What was your job title at the public administrator's office?
Estate coordinator too.
And as an estate coordinator, can you just give the members of the jury like an idea of what your responsibilities were, what you did?
It was our responsibility to administer probates, estates assigned to us.
Okay, estates assigned to you.
Mhm.
And we were, some people may have familiarity with that. Did that involve houses of people that maybe died with not immediate heirs?
It would be decedents who had any property, personal, real, anything that needed to be administered through the probate process. It was our job to either sell or basically you want to end up with income at the end of the probate process so that you have a distribution for heirs or beneficiaries.
Okay,
So
and so it would be sort of handling what's
it's
left
handling what's left of the person, right?
to
who
give to
passed.
their heirs.
Correct.
And so then that position that you had was called estate coordinator.
Coordinator, correct.
Were you the only estate coordinator or are there more than one in the office?
I was not the only one, there were more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did some of that estate coordination involve you maybe meeting with people fixing up houses or people in real estate?
Yeah, if a decedent had real property and that needed to be administered through the probate process, sold, fixed up, yes, we would have to partake in that.
Okay. So sometimes you would be going out to houses and walking through them, working with people that maybe worked on the houses in order
Working
to
with the
sell.
vendors, correct, yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated that Mr. Tellis came in as the public administrator at some point, kind of succeeding Mr. Cahill.
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
Do you remember what year that was?
I think it was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could it have been 2019?
Oh, I honestly don't remember what
That's
year
okay.
that was.
That's okay. When he came into the office, you were working still there.
Yes.
Did he implement certain changes about how yourself and other employees could go about their work?
Yeah, there were lots of changes.
And were those changes well received by all of the employees, or were they kind of divisive?
We were very divisive on them.
Okay. At some point, would you have considered yourself friends with Mr. Tellis?
He's giving her googly eyes.
at some
Look at the
point.
googly eyes.
I mean, sure, not in the beginning, but
Yeah.
sure.
Over time,
Over
did you
time.
develop a friendship?
Yes.
Been in jail for almost
I
2
want to
years.
kind of
It's
move
like,
to May of 2022.
Okay.
Did you become aware that reporter Jeff Garriman was possibly writing a story that would have included information about you?
Yes.
Who told you that Mr. Garriman was writing that story?
Rob did.
And by Rob, you mean Mr. Tellis?
Robert Tellis, yes.
Did he give you contact information for Mr. Garriman
Yes.
to call him?
Yes.
Did you talk to Mr. Garriman?
I did.
And was that a brief conversation?
Very brief.
Okay. Do you remember in May of 22 if Mr. Garriman ever came to the public administrator's office?
He did.
And what was his purpose in coming there?
Just to actually see the office, and I know Rob invited him over to take a look and see what was going on in the office.
Okay. And so Mr. Garriman was present in the office at some point in May of 22?
Correct.
And that was at Mr. Tellis's invitation?
Correct.
And do you know if Mr. Tellis sat for an interview?
It was on TV, but yes. Okay.
it was on TV. We
Was
watched it.
there, to your knowledge, a news story that followed that interview?
Yes.
And what was Rob's reaction to that news story?
I don't think any of us were happy about that news story.
You were not happy.
Yes.
I guess I should say it this way. Were you happy about the news story?
I was upset, embarrassed, and relieved all at the same time, I think.
Okay. Upset, embarrassed, and relieved. What was Mr. Tellis's reaction?
I would assume upset.
Did he ever talk to you about that story?
Yes, we talked about that story.
What did he say about it?
He was not happy about it.
Okay. What were his feelings about Mr. Garriman?
He did not like Mr. Garriman.
Was it,
Uh-oh.
did you ever describe it as stronger than dislike?
Like hate.
Hated
Uh-oh.
him?
Look at his face. Boss baby's getting upset, and Roberta's going to roll over on him. She's saying that he hated Garriman. He invited Garriman over to the office to talk to him, to try and, win him over, as someone with his personality may do, trying to get him to not write the story and convince him that none of it was true. We watched that interview about how he talked about the old guard and, how those people were giving him such a hard time, and, she's just a coworker kind of stuff. She's throwing him under the bus.
Assume he hated him.
Did he ever tell you he hated him?
Yes.
Yeah.
He had said that? I assume that was after the story was written?
Yes.
Were there other stories besides that first one that followed?
Yeah, there were a lot of stories that followed.
I think there was only
And
4.
in those succeeding stories, I assume, did Mr. Tellis's feelings about Mr. Garriman change, or did it sort of stay in that negative hate space?
I honestly don't know if his feelings changed about it. I just think they were terrible stories, intentional stories. So
Okay.
it ruined his career, right? It
Ruined
his
Mr.
chances.
I'm sorry?
It ruined his chances to run. So I would
Okay.
assume he'd be upset.
All right, give him motive.
By that, you're saying at the time, Mr. Tellis was running in a primary for public administrator,
Right.
and those stories were published, is that fair?
Yes.
And then Mr. Tellis lost the primary,
Yes.
meaning he wouldn't be public administrator the following year.
Correct.
After Mr. Tellis lost that primary, well, let me ask you this. When he lost the primary, did he lose the primary to someone who was already working at the public administrator's office?
Yes. Rita Reed.
And was that one of the employees that was kind of against his changes?
Yes.
After he lost that primary, did he come to the office?
Not as much. No.
Okay. Was he like working from home or staying away?
Working from home, he'd come in and sign checks or sign legal documents.
Okay. Did he ever express concern about Mr. Gehrman writing another article?
No,
Did you ever hear, like you said, he had said that he hated Mr. Gehrman. Were you two communicating much after he loses the primary?
not very much, no.
Okay, and that's because he was primarily working from home or coming in?
Correct.
She just wants to get out of there.
Did you ever know Mr. Tellis to respond to things Mr. Gehrman had written on social media?
I'm so sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Were you ever aware of whether Mr. Tellis responded to stuff Mr.
Oh.
Gehrman had written on social media?
Yes.
And it was called Twitter back then?
Correct.
Did you have a feeling about whether or not he should do that?
Yeah, I told him to stop.
And did you just think that was going to cause more problems?
I just felt like the more you were responding with Mr. Gehrman, the more articles were going to come out for no reason.
Okay.
So, yeah.
She's telling him to get off of Twitter. Stop being a twittiot. Stop tweeting, Robbie. We don't know what she called him. Backseat lover.
So after Mr. Tellis loses the primary, that's in June, is that correct?
Sure, I don't remember.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
okay. Sometime after that, do you become aware that Mr. Gehrman has now made another public records request?
Yes,
And I assume it's after the primary.
correct.
And that's for communications between yourself and Mr. Tellis?
Yep, and then also between Rita Reed and Mr. Mike Murphy.
Okay. And did the county notify you that, hey, you're gonna, this request has been made for your emails and that sort of
Yes,
thing?
yeah, communication, the director of communications or another representative from Clark County
Okay,
sent me an email about it.
okay. And then,
Look at his face. Come on, baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Come on. He's still like, you can see like his facial expression, like he's still trying to get her. Come visit me in prison, jail.
I want to now move forward to Labor Day weekend of
Okay.
2022. So this will be September. Do you recall if you went into work at all on that Friday of Labor Day weekend?
I did. I went into work on Friday. I had found out the week prior that I was getting to transfer to Clark County Social Services, where I work now. And
Getting
so
to
I
transfer.
had over 60-some cases.
She said, I'm getting to, not I had to transfer. Listen to her choice of words. I was getting to transfer. She wanted to get the hell out of there. Interesting. Let's just move that a little bit.
Friday, I had found out the week prior that I was getting to transfer to Clark County Social Services, where I work now. And so I had over 60-some cases assigned to me that I had to complete case statuses on for the next person who was going to receive that assignment. So I went in with the intent of overtime to work on those case statuses. And I saw an email from the communications department asking us to review these emails that were going to be sent forth.
Okay.
To Gehrman. So I ended up that morning requesting overtime for that instead of doing my case statuses.
Okay.
So yes.
I've shown both these exhibits to Mr. Draskovich, Your Honor. May I approach the witness? Ms. Lee Kennett, I'm showing you what's been marked as states 341 and 342. 341 is just a calendar, just so we can talk about when we're talking or when I'm asking you questions. And that appears to be a calendar for September 2022, correct?
Yes.
And then, 342, it's redacted, but it appears to be an email to yourself and Mr. Tellis.
Okay.
And it's from September 1st, is that correct?
Okay. Yep.
State moves to admit 341, 342.
No objection.
I'm gonna put on the overhead states
Oh,
341,
yes. Do it.
which is our calendar.
Is it a video?
And I think you said that
Calendar.
you went into work on the Friday before Labor Day weekend in order to catch up on some past casework.
To complete case statuses, not catch up, but case status is for when I moved on.
Okay,
Yep.
and so that would have been on Friday, the 2nd?
Correct.
And I don't need to know the exact time, but did you go in the morning, or when would you have been there?
That's the day of the
Yeah,
killing.
in the morning, 7, 8 a.m. I don't remember. I'm sure human resources will have my
Yeah,
time
because you would have
clock,
had to
so-
log in on a computer.
Correct.
But you said that you saw an email with regard to the messages that were going to be released.
Correct.
What was your understanding of the date they were going to be released?
I had no idea when they were going to be released.
Okay, did you feel that there was some urgency for you to go through them on the Friday?
I believe there was a deadline of when they had to be reviewed by.
Okay.
So yeah, there was urgency.
Okay, and so instead of doing your work, you start going through this group of messages that may be released to the reporter.
Correct.
And that's all on the 2nd.
That's correct.
The day
Now
of
I'm
the
putting on the
killing.
overhead 342.
Thanks, Kimmy.
And does that appear to be an email? I mean, it's sent at 5:45 PM on the 1st. So you would have seen that email on,
Friday, because I leave work normally 5 p.m.
so
the
you would
day
have,
before. I didn't see it on Thursday. Correct.
okay. So you received the email about the messages, but you don't see it till Friday, right?
Correct.
So the email is sent out on Thursday, hey, go through the messages.
Wait, hold on. Not Sir Ray Davies. Breaking news. Susan Lawrence found guilty of manslaughter in Florida. That's the neighbor trial where she shot through the door. That trial's already over. There's a verdict. Is that for real? Because if you're pranking me, I'm not going to be happy for interrupting the stream. But that is news. Interesting that she's found guilty of the same crime that Ashley Benefield was found guilty of, with completely different circumstances in Florida. So close in time. Thank you, Not Survey Davies, for breaking the news. Now everyone can stay here and not go anywhere. Because we are about to look at the redacted attorney-client privilege, hopefully, messages that Roberta Lee Kennett went through the day of the murder. And remember, whoever that person was, dressed up in that orange thing with the big hat and the was at the Gehrman home at 11:18 a.m. Let's see what time she's looking at these emails and if she saw him. Tell us. Or Tayez. Somebody pointed out that his wife pronounced it Tayez in the 911 call. Is it possible that he pronounces it differently than his wife? Interesting. Or that everyone is pronouncing it wrong and we should be saying Tayez. Now I'm curious.
And then you go in on Friday and start going through the messages.
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you ever talk to Mr. Tellis about the group of messages that were going to be released?
After I had reviewed them, I had created like a Word document advising him what concerns of some of the emails exchanges. My concerns were about some of our vendors named in there. And that was it. I actually said, like, I really don't care what was in here. There doesn't appear anything beyond the name of one of our vendors
He's like, yeah.
that I had concerns with.
Okay.
Yep.
Did he raise any concerns to you about what was in the group?
He did not.
Okay, so you sent him, is it fair to say, like a Word document by
Correct.
email to say,
Yep.
these are the things I'm worried about?
Correct.
Okay. After that, do you do anything with regard to those messages?
No.
I assume at some point you leave work on that Friday
Correct.
and you go home, and I'm just going to put on the overhead 340.
Give it to me, baby.
You go home and I assume at some point you see some news broadcasts about Jeff Gehrman.
Saturday morning, because it was my intent to go back into the office that whole weekend to complete my case statuses. So I wake up, I look at local news every morning while I'm getting ready. I saw on Twitter or X, whatever, an article about Gehrman being murdered.
Okay.
And so that freaked me out. Yes.
And once you learn of that on the news, do you have communications between yourself and Mr. Tellis about the fact that Mr. Gehrman had been murdered?
Yes, I had reached out and said something to the fact like, oh my gosh, Mr. Gehrman's been murdered. Sent him a copy of the screenshot of that and said I was not going to go into work anymore.
And was that just because you were a little bit
Yes.
concerned about your safety?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Draskovich, this is 343. May I approach, Your Honor? Ms. Buchanan, I'm showing you what's been marked stage 343. I know you probably don't recognize the type of document it is, but do these appear to be text messages between yourself and Mr. Tellis?
Right, yeah, from that morning, yep.
Okay, in fact, I gave you a copy of
Right.
this a few days ago for you to review.
Right,
And so this is a fair representation of your communications?
yes.
State moves to omit 343.
No objection.
Okay, we gonna get to see him?
I'm turning to the, excuse me. The second page of the, the third page of the document. And it appears to be a text from you, right?
Yes,
And it's from 9/4/2022, and it looks like it's at a little after 7 a.m. And
Right.
you're saying, oh my goodness, Jeff Gehrman died.
yep.
And it looks just from the punctuation like that was surprising to you.
Absolutely.
That was on the 4th, right? Because his body was found on the 3rd.
And I think you said that you sent screenshots of the
Of that
articles.
article.
This is on page 4. It looks like there's a communication on 9/4, same date, and it looks like you send a screenshot to Mr. Tellis of like communication on social media. Is that fair?
Yep.
And
Too small to read.
the second message appears to be we have a bigger version of it, but a
I can't see
screenshot of
it.
the article.
Mhm.
Is that you?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
I can't see it, so.
Yeah, I actually have a
Just
bigger
assuming.
version. I'm
Okay.
one step behind you. So does that look like a readable version of the screenshot of what you saw on social media about Mr. Gehrman's death?
Sure.
And then,
Yeah, that's what I thought I sent, yes.
okay. So those were sent to Mr. Tellis.
Correct.
And his response, this is on page 5 of the document. It's kind of focusing. His response to you is holy shit.
Yeah, yes.
And you actually respond.
It's all over Twitter.
It's all over Twitter.
Correct.
So then do you communicate with him your concern about going into work?
Yes,
And so you, I think if I'm understanding you, you opt not to go into work that day?
absolutely not. Correct. I stayed home.
Okay. I want to move on. This is page 34 of the documents. And it looks like, are you able to read that up there from you?
It's an overhead projector. This is what we get with the overhead. We don't have Craig Bates of the tiny desk to make it awesome. If you know, you know.
Let me zoom in a little. So this is a communication, it looks like from you to Mr. Tellis on
Okay.
9/6 of 2022.
Okay.
And it looks like you write, have you received a response from Jeff or the DA? Just wondering.
Okay.
Do you know what that's in regard to?
I do not remember. I'm just looking at that. I don't.
Okay. Was it, do you think it was in regard to the records or do you not remember?
I
or-
don't even remember what Jeff I'm talking about on there or the DA. Probably, yeah, our DA for Clark County.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't remember a
Have you
lot.
ever
okay.
received a response
But,
from
I
Jeff
mean,
or
fair
the
to say
DA?
that's what that text says.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And the only DA, I mean, like the DA that you would have been interacting with would be like the DA civil who was-
For public
those-
administrators, correct.
Okay, dealing with those messages.
Right.
Okay. And then this is page 36. And it is from 9/6 of 22. And you send a message, Rob, WTF,
Yep.
please do not be driving your Yukon around for a while.
Correct.
What had you seen
Oh.
that made you send that message to him?
Rob, WTF, please don't be driving your Yukon around for a while. The Denali. The red Denali. Yep, she connected the dots early on. This is on the 6th. Take it back and let her read it again. Rob, WTF.
9/6 of 22, and you send a message, Rob, WTF,
Yep.
please do not be driving your Yukon around for a while.
Correct.
What had you seen that made you send that message to him?
I think what everyone else saw, that Yukon in the photos
You mean
or
the,
in media,
the media messages that
Right.
Metro sent out
right?
of a car associated with Mr. Gehrman's murder?
Correct.
And had you known Mr. Tellis to have a similar Yukon?
He had driven it to work a few times. I believe it's his wife's vehicle.
Okay.
Yes.
And so
Ruh-roh.
you're kind of like, whoa, don't
Ruh-roh.
drive your car around
Yeah.
for a while.
Yes.
And then his response is, that's crazy.
That's crazy.
yeah.
Is that fair?
Yep.
It's crazy that
And it looks
whoever
like-
killed the reporter that was
Page
writing those hit
37.
pieces about me is now dead. And whoever killed him has the same car as my wife. That's crazy. I love this trial. We needed this trial. We needed this so bad. So badly. Death of the adverb kills me. We need this trial so badly. And I can't wait for him to get on the stand. I wonder if she's going to ask her about the backseat shenanigans or if that was excluded per motion in lemonade. I don't know.
7, you say,
Yep.
please tell me your Yukon is not that color.
Correct.
You wrote that.
Correct.
Oh, she really didn't want it to be him.
And this is page 38. He says, it is similar if not the same.
Correct.
And you ask him another detail, do you have racks on yours too, meaning the,
Right. From the photos, right?
okay. And this is page 39. What do you say?
Please tell me you don't.
Okay, and then,
Have
I'm
racks.
freaking out, Rob.
and are you starting to
Wait,
get
she's
nervous?
freaking out. Hold
Yeah,
on.
I'm starting to suspect.
Okay.
Starting to suspect. Oh, is she going to say that she thinks it was him? Oh, maybe this is how she saves her marriage. Okay, I need to take a breath. You need to take a breath. We all need to take a breath. We're going to rewind that because that's what we do here. We're going to need more than popcorn. She's freaking out. She's reliving this right now in front of her very eyes. Okay, I'm like super focused. Okay. She's like, please tell me you don't have those racks on your car. Taking it back a sec.
What do you say?
Please tell me you don't.
Okay, and then,
I'm freaking out, Rob.
and are you starting to get nervous?
Yeah, I'm starting to suspect.
Okay, and then this is page 40. He says, yeah, I think so. It's fine. I didn't do it.
Right?
And then you ask another question about his tires.
Right. You don't have special rims, do you?
Okay.
She's putting it together.
And then you.
No,
this is
it's
page
fine. I
41,
didn't do
tell
it.
him I am, and then,
Very worried. Right.
and you then say, what?
I say it's not you, but they could try to use the vehicle as a way to suspect you.
And then his response is, my car has all matching wheel patterns.
Okay?
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
My car has all matching wheel patterns.
And then this is page 43. You seem kind of bewildered. You say, I don't understand.
Correct.
And then you say,
Your rims look like the photo.
Your rims look like the photo.
and this is page 44. He answers you, I think they are saying that the front does not match the back.
Correct.
And then you say,
F, your car is identical.
okay.
She says, what? Your car's identical?
So you kind of communicate, you say,
F, your car is identical.
F, your car is identical.
so you kind of communicate with him back and forth, fair to say, based on what you saw
Right.
from the Metro release of the vehicle.
That's correct.
Okay. And those were contained in these text messages that we discussed.
Yes.
Do you know what trillion is?
Yes.
What is that?
For me, it was just an instant messaging app.
Okay, like Snapchat or something like that?
Correct.
Trillion?
Did you install that ever on your phone?
I had.
And who asked you to install it on your phone, or
Rob?
Rob, tell us?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes? Sorry.
Yes.
And
yes.
you installed it?
Yes.
Did you two communicate through Trillion?
We had. Yes.
No, it's the Cheaters app, the Cheaters messaging app, like Signal or Signal. Trillions. Trillion? TRILLIAN? Let you use multiple messaging services in one place? Okay. Like Signal? WhatsApp?
Court's indulgence. Thank you, ma'am. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Oh, nothing about the back
You
seat.
had a cross-examination. What time was Your Honor wanting to take?
How long do you think you'll be?
It could be a little bit.
Okay, all right, so we will break for lunch at this time. During this recess, you're admonished not to discuss or communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, in a way regarding the case or its merits, either by voice, phone, email, text, internet, or other means of communication or social media. Read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do any research, consult dictionaries, the internet, or reference materials. Do any investigation, test a theory, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way
Don't recreate
investigate or learn about
anything.
the case on your own, or form or express any opinion regarding the case till it's finally submitted to you. And we'll be in recess till, let's see, 1:15. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next thing, jury, please. Jurors.
Oh, man. We have to wait until after lunch to come back for the cross, but that was interesting. Roberta suspected him. She suspected him. They were having conversations about it. They were having conversations about the rims. And I think she knows deep down, or believes deep down, that he did it. What do you think? What do you think, my friends? Give me 1 second while I set up the next stream. I have too many tabs open, as always. She knows. I think she knows too. I think she knows. Yep, they focused on the murder, not the affair. I wanted to hear that question, but they got what they wanted. I think it was probably excluded. Pretrial motion in lemonade. Thank you, Kimmy, for 2 of the super chats that I put up earlier. Thank you so much. And Tanny, also, thank you so much. And Kimmy again says, ironic when married, don't assume the one you were backseat driving with won't turn on you. Yep, that's true. Nikolai said, Melanie, if you were his lawyer, what would you be saying to tell us on breaks? Be like, dude, hold it together. I don't know. There, no matter what he does with his facial expressions, people are going to pick. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about his facial expressions? Do you think it makes him look more guilty or more innocent? I think he's toned it down since the first 2 days. This is day 3, and I thought we saw a lot more expression days 1 and 2. He may have been told to tone it down, but I think he's doing a good job of keeping his ire under control. Kimmy says he manipulates his females, Napoleon syndrome. That's interesting, Kimmy. I don't know how tall he is. Does anybody know how tall he is? And piggybacking off that last question, Diane says, Should Boss Baby look blank instead of animated? You know, when you're in a tight shot like that and a close-up, you're going to see every micro expression. So it's hard. Listen, people thought Ashley Benefield was guilty because she had a blank expression most of the time and didn't show a lot of emotion unless she was on the stand, which in my opinion was genuine. But a lot of people trashed her by saying she wasn't emotional enough, therefore she's guilty. We see it also in Karen Reed. People don't like her facial expressions, therefore she's guilty. So, I mean, I think it's hard, it's a tough call, is what I think, and I want to know what you guys think. Was he offered a plea deal? I don't know. I do not know. He does. He comes across as manufactured. Debbie Jo says he looks more and more like a cartoon every day. I know, right? And Debbie believes he's going down, down, down. Let us hit the like button, shall we? That'd be so very kind of all of you. People think he's overacting, that he's medicated. It could be. Absolutely could be. All right, here's what we're going to do, my friends. Here is what we are going to do. We are going to break. Everyone go get a drink. Use the facilities. Do whatever it is that you need to do. We're going to give the mods a break, and we're going to come back for the new stream at 4 p.m. Eastern. I set up the teleportation. I'm hoping that it's going to work out. So safe travels, and I'm going to teleport you on over to the afternoon stream, and hopefully it works. Let me know you got there safely. Thank you, moderators, for keeping it classy this afternoon. That was fun. You're going to want to come back because you're going to want to see the cross of Roberta Lee Kennett, the backseat lava. Although we're not hearing anything about that, and I'm kind of bummed. Maybe somebody will open the door. Who knows? Open the door, the backseat door. All right, my friends, love you all. Be cool, be kind, be classy, safe travels. I will see you in about less than 1 hour. Take care. Hit the like button on your way out and then hit it on your way in, please. Thank you. Love you so much. XOXO. Bye.